There we go. All right. Every time I forget that my mic just doesn't automatically turn on when I want it to. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Tolkien Tuesday. I'm your host, Paul Springer, and I'm pretty sure we have a pretty good show ready for you guys. We have hobbits galore. We will be tackling chapters 4 and 5 of the Fellowship of the Ring, book 1 of the Fellowship of the Ring. That being Shortcut to Mushrooms and A Conspiracy Unmasked. And, of course, we have a very special guest today, Molly Ostertag, otherwise known as Hobbitgate. Maybe I should have actually checked her Twitter handle before I said this, but yes, the founder of Tolkien herself, the ambassador to gay hobbits everywhere. She will be joining us later on after the chapters to discuss all manner of things from hobbits to gay subtext to probably the 2019 movie Cats. Anyway, so yeah, for those of you who are new to the channel, let me just say welcome. This is kind of how we start things out. I say hi, I riff a little, we try to get in there, and then we go into a theatrical reading of Lord of the Rings, in which I basically read out 2 chapters while including various sound effects, the music by Howard Shore, because how the fuck can I not? How can I not do that? And then, usually, there's a nice little 15-minute break for you to go and do your business, grab a snack, use the bathroom, change your hobbit feet because you're getting sweaty. Actually, I'm going to take these hobbit feet off. Yeah, those are meant for winter months, and it's still, well, it's a nice crisp fall day here in the Midwest, so I'm not going to complain too much. But, yeah. And just kind of as a forward to this, I started this sometime in the summer. I was inspired by my friend Aaron. They have been doing a reread of themselves on Twitch as well. But I kind of want to make it more theatrical. I'm a theater kid who hasn't done theater in a while, so if any of you have watched the Harley Quinn cartoon recently, I'm very much the Clayface of where I'm like, I must act! But then I'm also like, I want to get other people's input on this because I feel very narcissistic just being like, yes, watch me dance. So joining me is usually random people I picked up on Twitter. But yeah, the main purpose though I've also kind of wanted to do is to make Lord of the Rings more digestible. Specifically helping people get into the books. The books are daunting. All right. My dad read me The Hobbit, and I loved it. I'm like, yay! And then he's like, okay, well, we have Fellowship of the Ring. How'd you like me to read you that? I'm like, oh, there's more. And then he started reading it, and I got really bored because I was 9, and I think we just kind of stopped right there until we watched the movies. But I think even for like adults now, it's a very dry opening. Not much really happens at the beginning. It's very domestic, and I think that's a beautiful aspect of it. But I'm hoping by making it kind of sound more like a radio play, by adding sound effects, by adding music, by doing silly voices, it can encourage people to actually delve into the books themselves and start to, analyze it themselves and look into it. And at the end of the day, I just want to do silly voices and goof around with other nerds. So why am I wasting your time here when I could be wasting your time with a book written by a master of his craft? So yeah. Hope you guys enjoy this. I hope I work hard on it, but yeah. Enjoy. Chapter 4. A Shortcut to Mushrooms. In the morning, Frodo woke refreshed. He was lying in a bower made by a living tree, with branches laced and drooping to the ground. His bed was of fern and grass, deep and soft and strangely fragrant. The sun was shining through the fluttering leaves, which were still green upon the tree. He jumped up and went out. Sam was sitting on the grass near the edge of the wood. Pippin was standing, studying the sky and the weather. There was no sign of the elves. "They have left us fruit and drink and bread," said Pippin. "Come and have your breakfast. The bread tastes almost as good as it did last night. I did not want to leave you any, but Sam insisted." Frodo sat down beside Sam and began to eat. "What is the plan for today?" asked Pippin. "To walk to Buckleberry as quickly as possible," answered Frodo, and gave his attention to the food. "Do you think we shall see anything of those riders?" asked Pippin cheerfully. Under the morning sun, the prospect of seeing a whole troop of them did not seem very alarming to him. "Yes, probably," said Frodo, not liking the reminder. "But I hope to get across the river without their seeing us." "Did you find out anything about them from Gildor?" "Not much. Only hints and riddles," said Frodo, evasively. "Did she ask about the sniffing?" "We didn't discuss it," said Frodo, with his mouth full. "You should have. I'm sure it's very important." "In that case, I'm sure Gildor would have refused to explain it," said Frodo sharply. "And now leave me in peace for a bit. I don't want to answer a string of questions when I'm eating. I want to think." "Good heavens," said Pippin. "At breakfast?" He walked away towards the edge of the green. From Frodo's mind, the bright morning, treacherously bright he thought, had not banished the fear of pursuit, and he pondered the words of Gildor. The merry voice of Pippin came to him. He was running on the green turf and singing. "No, I could not," he said to himself. "It is one thing to take my young friends walking over the Shire with me, until we are hungry and weary and food and bed are sweet. To take them into exile, where food and weariness may have no cure, is quite another. Even if they are willing to come, the inheritance is mine alone. I don't think I ought to even take Sam." He looked at Sam Gamgee and discovered that Sam was watching him. "Well, Sam," he said, "what about it? I'm leaving the Shire as soon as ever I can. In fact, I have made up my mind now not even to wait a day at Kirkhollow, if it can be helped." "Very good, sir." "You still mean to come with me?" "I do." "It is going to be very dangerous, Sam. It is already dangerous. Most likely neither of us will ever come back." "If you don't come back, sir, then I shan't, that's certain," said Sam. "Don't you leave him," they said to me. "Leave him," I said. "I never mean to. I'm going with him if he climbs to the moon, and if any of those black riders try to stop him, they'll have Sam Gamgee to reckon with," I said. They laughed. "Who are they? And what are you talking about?" "The elves, sir. We had some talk last night, and they seemed to know you were going away, so I didn't see the use in denying it. Wonderful folk, elves, sir, wonderful." "They are," said Frodo. "Do you like them still, now that you've had a closer view?" They seem a bit above my likes and dislikes, so to speak," answered Sam slowly. "Don't seem to matter what I think about them. They're quite different from what I expected. So old and young. So gay and sad, as it were." Frodo looked at Sam rather startled, half expecting to see some outward sign of the odd change that seemed to have come over him. It did not sound like the voice of the old Sam Gamgee that he thought he knew, but it looked like the old Sam Gamgee sitting there, except that his face was unusually thoughtful. "Do you feel any need to leave the Shire now that your wish to see them has already come true?" he asked. "Yes, sir. I don't know how to say it, but after last night, I feel different. I seem to see ahead, in a kind of way. I know we are going to take a very long road, into darkness, but I know I can't turn back. It isn't see elves now, nor dragons, nor mountains that I want. I don't rightly know what I want. I have something to do before the end, and it lies ahead, not in the Shire. I must see it through, sir, if you understand me." "I don't altogether, but I understand that Gandalf chose me a good companion. I'm content. We will go together." Frodo finished his breakfast in silence. Then, standing up, he looked over the land ahead and called to Pippin. "All ready to start?" he said as Pippin ran up. "We must be getting off at once. We slept late, and there are a good many miles to go." "You slept late, you mean?" said Pippin. "I was up long before, and we were only waiting for you to finish eating and thinking." I have finished both now. I'm going to make for Buckleberry Ferry as quickly as possible. I'm not going out of the way, back to the road we left last night. I'm going to cut straight across country from here. Then you are going to fly, said Pippin. You can't cut straight on foot anywhere in this country. We can cut straighter than the road anyway, answered Frodo. The ferry is east of Woodhall, but the hard road curves away to the left. You can see a bend of it away north, over there. It goes round the north end of the Marish, so as to strike the causeway from the bridge above Stock. But that is miles out of the way. We could save a quarter of the distance if we made a line for the ferry from where we stand. Shortcuts make long delays, argued Pippin. The country is rough round here, and there are bogs and all kinds of difficulties in the Marish. I know the land in these parts, and if you're worrying about black riders, I can't see it as any worse meeting them on the road than in a wood or a field. It is less easy to find people in woods and fields, answered Frodo. And if you are supposed to be on the road, there is some chance that you will be looked for on the road, and not off it. All right, said Pippin. I'll follow you into every bog and ditch, but it's hard. I had counted on passing the Golden Perch at Stock before sundown. Best beer in the East Farthing, or used to be. It is a long time since I tasted it. That settles it, said Frodo. Shortcuts make delays, but inns make longer ones. At all costs, we must keep you away from the Golden Perch. We want to get to Bucklebury before dark. What do you say, Sam? I'll go along with you, Mr. Frodo, said Sam, in spite of private misgivings and a deep regret for the best beer in the East Farthing. And if we are going to toil through bog and briar, let's go now, said Pippin. It was already nearly as hot as it had been the day before, but clouds were beginning to come up from the west. It looked likely to turn to rain. The hobbits scrambled down a steep green bank and plunged into the thick trees below. Their course had been chosen to leave Woodhall to their left, and to cut slanting through the woods that clustered along the eastern side of the hills, until they reached the flats beyond. Then they could make straight for the ferry over a country that was open, except for a few ditches and fences. Frodo reckoned they had 18 miles to go in a straight line. He soon found that the thicket was closer and more tangled than it had appeared. There were no paths in the undergrowth, and they did not get on very fast. When they had struggled to the bottom of the bank, they found a stream running down from the hills behind in a deeply dug bed, with steep, slippery slopes overhung with brambles. Most conveniently, it cut across the line that they had chosen. They could not jump over it, nor indeed get across it at all without getting wet, scratched, and muddy. They halted, wondering what to do. First check, said Pippin, smiling grimly. Sam looked back. Through an opening in the trees, he caught a glimpse of the top of the green bank from which they had climbed down. Look, he said, clutching Frodo by the arm. They all looked, and on the edge, high above them, they saw against the sky a horse standing. Beside it stooped a black figure. They at once gave up any idea of going back. Frodo led the way and plunged quickly into the thick bushes beside the stream. Whew, he said to Pippin. We were both right. The shortcut has gone crooked already, but we got under cover only just in time. You've got sharp ears, Sam. Can you hear anything coming? They stood still, almost holding their breath as they listened. But there was no sound of pursuit. I don't fancy he would try bringing his horse down that bank, said Sam. But I guess he knows we came down it. We'd better get going. Going on was not altogether easy. They had packs to carry, and the bushes and brambles were reluctant to let them through. They were cut off from the wind by the ridge behind, and the air was still and stuffy. When they forced their way at last into more open ground, they were hot and tired and very scratched, and they were also no longer certain of the direction in which they were going. The banks of the stream sank as it reached the levels and became broader and shallower, wandering off towards the Marish and the river. Why, this is the Stock Brook, said Pippin. If we're going to try and get back on our course, we must cross at once and bear right. They waded the stream and hurried over a wide open space, rush-grown and treeless, on the further side. Beyond that, they came again to a belt of trees, tall oaks for the most part, with here and there an elm tree or an ash. The ground was fairly level, and there was little undergrowth, but the trees were too close for them to see far ahead. The leaves blew upwards in sudden gusts of wind, and spots of rain began to fall from the overcast sky. Then the wind died away, and the rain came streaming down. They trudged along as fast as they could, over patches of grass and through thick drifts of old leaves, and all about them the rain pattered and trickled. They did not talk, but kept glancing back and from side to side. After half an hour, Pippin said, "I hope we are not turned too much towards the south, and are not walking long ways through this wood. It is not a very broad belt. I should have said no more than a mile at the widest. We ought to have been through it by now." "It is no good our starting to go in zigzags," said Frodo. "That won't mend matters. Let us keep on as we are going. I'm not sure that I want to come out to the open yet." They went on for perhaps another couple of miles. Then the sun gleamed out of ragged clouds again, and the rain lessened. It was now past midday, and they felt it was high time for lunch. They halted under an elm tree. Its leaves, though fast turning yellow, were still thick, and the ground at its feet was fairly dry and sheltered. When they came to make their meal, they found that the elves had filled their bottles with a clear drink, pale golden in color. It had the scent of a honey made of many flowers, and was wonderfully refreshing. Very soon they were laughing and snapping their fingers at rain and at black riders. The last few miles, they felt, would soon be behind them. Frodo propped his back against the tree trunk and closed his eyes. Sam and Pippin sat near, and they began to hum, and then to sing softly. "Ho, ho, ho, to the bottle I go, to heal my heart and drown my woe. Rain may fall, the wind may blow, and many miles be still to go, but under a tall tree I will lie, and let the clouds go sailing by. Ho, ho, ho!" They began again louder. They stopped short suddenly. Frodo sprang to his feet. A long, drawn-out wail came down the wind, like the cry of some evil and lonely creature. It rose and fell, and ended on a high, piercing note. Even as they sat and stood, as if suddenly frozen, it was answered by another cry, fainter and further off, but no less chilling to the blood. There was then a silence, broken only by the sound of the wind in the leaves. "And what do you think that was?" Pippin asked at last, trying to speak lightly, but quavering a little. "If it was a bird, it was one that I've never heard in the Shire before." "It was not a bird, or a beast," said Frodo. "It was a call, or a signal. There were words in that cry, though I could not catch them. But no hobbit has such a voice." No more was said about it. They were all thinking of the riders, but no one spoke of them. They were now reluctant either to stay or go on, but sooner or later they had got to get across the open country to the ferry, and it was best to go sooner and in daylight. In a few moments they had shouldered their packs again and were off. Before long, the wood came to a sudden end. Wide grassland stretched before them. They now saw that they had, in fact, turned too much to the south. Away over the flats they could glimpse the low hill of Bucklebury across the river, and it was now to their left. Creeping cautiously out from the edge of the trees, they set off across the open as quickly as they could. At first they felt afraid, away from the shelter of the wood. Far back behind them stood the high place where they had breakfasted. Frodo half expected to see the small, distant figure of a horseman on the ridge, dark against the sky, but there was no sign of one. The sun, escaping from the breaking clouds as it sank towards the hills they had left, was now shining brightly again. Their fear left them, though they still felt uneasy. But the land became steadily more tame and well-ordered. Soon they came into well-tended fields and meadows. There were hedges and gates and dikes for drainage. Everything seemed quiet and peaceful, just an ordinary corner of the Shire. Their spirits rose with every step. The line of the river grew nearer, and the black riders began to seem like phantoms of the woods now left far behind. They passed along the edge of a huge turnip field and came to a stout gate. Beyond it a rutted lane ran between low, well-laid hedges towards a distant clump of trees. Pippin stopped. "I know these fields and this gate," he said. "This is Bam Furlong, old Farmer Maggot's land. That's his farm away there in the trees." "One trouble after another," said Frodo, looking nearly as much alarmed as if Pippin had declared the lane was a slot leading to a dragon's den. The others looked at him in surprise. "What's wrong with old Maggot?" asked Pippin. "He's a good friend to all the Brandybucks. Of course he's a terror to trespassers and keeps ferocious dogs. But after all, folk down here are near the border and have to be more on their guard." "I know," said Frodo. "But all the same," he added with a shamefaced laugh, "I'm terrified of him and his dogs. I've avoided his farm for years and years. He caught me several times trespassing after mushrooms when I was a youngster at Brandy Hall. On the last occasion, he beat me, and then took me and showed me to his dogs. 'See, lads,' he said, 'next time this young varmint sets foot on my land, you can eat him. Now see him off.' They chased me all the way to the ferry. I never got over the fright, though I dare say the beasts knew their business and would not really have touched me." Pippin laughed. "Well, it's time you made it up, especially if you're coming back to live in Buckland. Old Maggot is a really stout fellow, if you leave his mushrooms alone. Let's get into the lane, then we shan't be trespassing. If we meet him, I'll do the talking. He's a friend of Mary's, and I used to come here with him a good deal at one time." They went along the lane until they saw the thatched roofs of a large house and farm buildings peeping out among the trees ahead. The Maggots and the Puddiefoots of Stock, and most of the inhabitants of the Marish, were house-dwellers, and this farm was stoutly built of brick and had a high wall all around it. There was a wide wooden gate opening out of the wall into the lane. Suddenly, as they drew nearer, a terrific baying and barking broke out, and a loud voice was heard shouting, "Rip! Bang! Wolf! Come on, lads!" Frodo and Sam stopped dead, but Pippin walked on a few paces. The gate opened, and 3 huge dogs came pelting out into the lane and dashed towards the travelers, barking fiercely. They took no notice of Pippin, but Sam shrank against the wall while 2 wolfish-looking dogs sniffed at him suspiciously and snarled if he moved. The largest and most ferocious of the 3 halted in front of Frodo, bristling and growling. Through the gate there now appeared a broad, thick-set hobbit with a round red face. "Hello, hello! And who may you be? What may you be doing?" he asked. "Good afternoon, Mr. Maggot," said Pippin. The farmer looked at him closely. "Well, if it isn't Master Pippin, Mr. Peregrine Took, I should say," he cried, changing from a scowl to a grin. "It's a long time since I saw you round here. It's lucky for you that I know you. I was just going to set out my dogs on any strangers. There are some funny things going on today. Of course, we do get queer folk wandering in these parts at times, too near the river," he said, shaking his head. "This fellow was the most outlandish I have ever set my eyes on. He won't cross my land without leave a second time, not if I can stop it." "What fellow do you mean?" asked Pippin. "And you haven't seen him?" said the farmer. "He went up the lane towards the causeway not a long while back. He was a funny customer, asking funny questions. Perhaps you'll come along inside, and we'll pass the news more comfortable. Got a drop of good ale on tap, if you and your friends are willing, Mr. Took." It seemed plain that the farmer would tell them more, if allowed to do it in his own time and fashion, so they all accepted the invitation. "What about the dogs?" asked Frodo. The farmer laughed. "Ha ha! They won't harm you, not unless I tell them to. Here, grip, bang, heel!" he cried. "Heel, wolf!" To the relief of Frodo and Sam, the dogs walked away and let them go free. Pippin introduced the other 2 to the farmer. "Mr. Frodo Baggins," he said. "You may not remember him, but he used to live in Brandy Hall." At the name Baggins, the farmer started and gave Frodo a sharp glance. For a moment, Frodo thought that the memory of stolen mushrooms had been aroused, and that the dogs would be told to see him off. But Farmer Maggot took him by the arm. "Well, if that isn't queerer than ever," he exclaimed. "Mr. Baggins, is it? Come inside. We must have a talk." They went into the farmer's kitchen and sat by the wide fireplace. Mrs. Maggot brought out beer in a huge jug and filled 4 large mugs. It was a good brew, and Pippin found himself more than compensated for missing the golden perch. Sam sipped his beer suspiciously. He had a natural mistrust of the inhabitants of other parts of the Shire, and also he was not disposed to be quick friends with anyone who had beaten his master, however long ago. After a few remarks about the weather and the agricultural prospects, which were no worse than usual, Farmer Maggot put down his mug and looked at them all in turn.
"Now, Mr. Peregrine," he asked, "where might you be coming from, and where might you be going to? Were you coming to visit me? For if so, you had gone past my gate without my seeing you."
"Well, no," answered Pippin. "To tell you the truth, since you've guessed it, we got into the lane from the other end. We had come over your fields, but that was quite by accident. We lost our way in the woods back near Woodall, trying to take a shortcut to the ferry."
"If you were in a hurry, the road would have served you better," said the farmer. "I wasn't worrying about that. You have leave to walk over my land if you have a mind, Mr. Peregrine."
"And you too, Mr. Baggins? Oh, I dare say you still like mushrooms."
He laughed.
"Ah, yes, I recognize the name. I recollect the time when young Frodo Baggins was one of the worst young rascals of Buckland. But it wasn't the mushrooms I was thinking of. You just heard the name Baggins before you turned up. What do you think that funny customer asked me?"
They waited anxiously for him to go on.
"Well,"
the farmer continued, approaching his point with slow relish,
"he came riding on a big black horse in at the gate, which happened to be open, and right up to my door. All black he was himself, too, and cloaked and hooded up, as if he did not want to be known. Now what in the shark can he want? I thought to myself. We don't see many of the big folk over the border, and anyway, I never heard of any like this black fellow. 'Good day to you,' I says, going up to him. 'This lane don't lead anywhere, and wherever you may be going, your quickest way will be back to the road.' I didn't like the looks of him, and when Grip came out, he took one sniff and let out a yelp, as if he'd been stung. He put down his tail and bolted off. The black fellow sat quite still. 'I come from yonder,' he said, slow and stiff-like, pointing back west over my fields, if you please. 'Have you seen Baggins?' he asked in a queer voice, and bent down towards me. I could not see any face, for his hood fell down so low, and I felt a sort of shiver down my back. I did not see why he should come riding over my land so bold. 'Be off!' I said. 'There are no Bagginses here. You're in the wrong part of the shire. You had better go back west to Hobbiton. You can go by road this time.' 'Baggins has left,' he answered in a whisper. 'He is coming. He is not far away. I wish to find him. If he passes, will you tell me? I will come back with gold.' 'No, you won't,' I said. 'You'll go back where you belong, double quick. I'll give you 1 minute before I call all my dogs.' He gave a sort of hiss. It might have been laughing, and it might not. And he spurred his great horse right at me, and I jumped out of the way only just in time. I called the dogs, but he swung off and rode through the gate and up the lane towards the causeway like a bolt of thunder. What do you think of that?"
Frodo sat for a moment, looking at the fire, but his only thought was how on earth he would reach the ferry. "I don't know what to think," he said at last.
"And I'll tell you what to think," said Maggot. "You should never have gone mixing yourself up with Hobbiton folk, Mr. Frodo. Folk are queer up there."
Sam stirred in his chair and looked at the farmer with an unfriendly eye.
"But you were always a reckless lad. And I heard you had left the brandy box and gone off to that old Mr. Bilbo. I said you were going to find trouble. Mark my words, this all comes of those strange doings of Mr. Bilbo's. His money was got in some strange fashion in foreign parts, they say. Maybe there is some that want to know what has become of the gold and jewels that he buried in the hill of Hobbiton, as I hear."
Frodo said nothing. The shrewd guesses of the farmer were rather disconcerting.
"Well, Mr. Frodo," Maggot went on, "I'm glad you've had the sense to come back to Buckland. My advice is, stay there, and don't get mixed up with these outlandish folk. You'll have friends in these parts. If any of these black fellows come after you again, I'll deal with them. I'll say you're dead, or have left the Shire, or anything you like. And that might be true enough, for as like as not, it is old Mr. Bilbo they want news of."
"Maybe you're right," said Frodo, avoiding the farmer's eye and staring at the fire. Maggot looked at him thoughtfully.
I see you have ideas of your own, he said. It is plain as my nose that no accident brought you and that rider here on the same afternoon. And maybe my news was no great news to you, after all. I'm not asking you to tell me anything you have a mind to keep to yourself. I see you're in some kind of trouble. Perhaps you are thinking it won't be too easy to get to the ferry without being caught.
I was thinking so, said Frodo. But we've got to try and get there. And it won't be done by sitting and thinking. So I'm afraid we must be going. Thank you very much indeed for your kindness. I have been in terror of you and your dogs for over 30 years, Farmer Maggot, though you may laugh to hear it. It's a pity, for I've missed a good friend. And now I'm sorry to leave so soon, but I'll come back perhaps one day, if I get a chance.
You'll be welcome when you come, said Maggot. But now I've a notion. It's near sundown already, and we were going to have our supper, for we mostly go to bed soon after the sun. If you and Mr. Peregrine and all could stay and have a bite with us, we would be pleased.
And so should we, said Frodo. But we must be going at once, I'm afraid. Even now it will be dark before we can reach the ferry.
Ah, but wait a minute. I was going to say, after a bit of supper, I'll get out a small wagon, and I'll drive you all to the ferry. That'll save you a good step, and it might also save you trouble of another sort.
Frodo now accepted the invitation gratefully, to the relief of Pippin and Sam. The sun was already behind the western hills, and the light was fading. 2 of Maggot's sons and his 3 daughters came in, and a generous supper was laid on the large table. The kitchen was lit with candles, and the fire was mended. Mrs. Maggot bustled in and out. 1 or 2 other hobbits belonging to the farm household came in. In a short while, 14 sat down to eat. There was beer in plenty, and a mighty dish of mushrooms and bacon, besides much other solid farmhouse fare. The dogs lay by the fire and gnawed rinds and cracked bones. When they had finished, the farmer and his sons went out with a lantern and got the wagon ready. It was dark in the yard when the guests came out. They threw their packs on board and climbed in. The farmer sat in the driving seat and whipped up his 2 stout ponies. His wife stood in the light of the open door. "You be careful of yourself, Maggot," she called. "Don't go arguing with any foreigners, and come straight back."
"I will,"
he said, and drove out of the gate. There was now no breath of wind stirring. The night was still and quiet, and a chill was in the air. They went without lights and took it slowly. After a mile or 2, the lane came to an end, crossing a deep dike, and climbing a short slope up onto the high-banked causeway. Maggot got down and took a good look either way, north and south, but nothing could be seen in the darkness, and there was not a sound in the still air. Thin strands of river mist were hanging above the dikes and crawling over the fields.
"It's going to be thick," said Maggot, "but I'll not light my lanterns till I turn for home. We'll hear anything on the road long before we meet it tonight."
It was 5 miles or more from Maggot's Lane to the ferry. The hobbits wrapped themselves up, but their ears were strained for any sound above the creak of the wheels and the slow clop of the ponies' hoofs. The wagon seemed slower than a snail to Frodo. Beside him Pippin was nodding towards sleep, but Sam was staring forwards into the rising fog. They reached the entrance to the ferry lane at last. It was marked by 2 tall white posts that suddenly loomed up on their right. Farmer Maggot drew in his ponies, and the wagon creaked to a halt. They were just beginning to scramble out, when suddenly they heard what they had all been dreading. Hooves on the road ahead. The sound was coming towards them. Maggot jumped down, and stood holding the ponies' heads, and peering forward into the gloom. Clip, clop, clip, clop, came the approaching rider. The fall of the hooves sounded loud in the still, foggy air. "You'd better be hidden, Mr. Frodo," said Sam anxiously. "You get down in the wagon and cover up with blankets, and we'll send this rider to the right-abouts." He climbed out and went to the farmer's side. Black riders would have to ride over him to get near the wagon. Clop, 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 clop. The rider was nearly on them.
"Hello there!"
called Farmer Maggot. The advancing hooves stopped short. They thought they could dimly guess a dark, cloaked shape in the mist, a yard or 2 ahead.
"Now then,"
said the farmer, throwing the reins to Sam and striding forward,
Don't you come a step nearer. What do you want, and where are you going?
I want Mr. Baggins. Have you seen him? Said a muffled voice. But the voice was the voice of Mary Brandybuck. A dark lantern was uncovered, and its light fell on the astonished face of the farmer.
Mr. Mary!
He cried. Yes, of course. Who did you think it was? Said Mary, coming forward. As he came out of the mist, and their fear subsided, he seemed suddenly to diminish to ordinary hobbit size. He was riding a pony, and a scarf was swathed about his neck and over his chin to keep out the fog. Frodo sprang out of the wagon to greet him. So there you are at last, said Mary. I was beginning to wonder if you would turn up at all today, and I was just going back to supper. When it grew foggy, I came across and rode up towards Stock to see if you had fallen in any ditches. But I'm blessed if I know which way you've come. Where did you find them, Mr. Maggot? In your duck pond?
No, I caught them trespassing, said the farmer, and nearly set my dogs on him. But they'll tell you the story, I've no doubt. Now, if you'll excuse me, Mr. Mary and Mr. Frodo and all, I'd best be turning back for home. Mrs. Maggot will be worrying with the night getting thick.
He backed the wagon into the lane and turned it.
Well, good night to you all, he said. It's been a queer day, and no mistake. And all's well as ends well, though perhaps we should not say that till we reach our own doors. I'll not deny I'll be glad now when I do.
He lit his lanterns and got up. Suddenly, he produced a large basket from under the seat.
I was nearly forgetting, he said. Mrs. Maggot put this up for Mr. Baggins with her compliments.
He handed it down and moved off, followed by a chorus of thanks and good nights. They watched the pale rings of light round his lanterns as they dwindled into the foggy night. Suddenly, Frodo laughed. From the covered basket he held, the scent of mushrooms was rising. Chapter 5. A Conspiracy Unmasked.
Now we had better get home ourselves, said Mary. There's something funny about all this, I see, but it must wait till we get in.
They turned down the fairy lane, which was straight and well kept, and edged with large whitewashed stones. In 100 yards or so, it brought them to the river bank, where there was a broad wooden landing stage. A large, flat ferry boat was moored beside it. The white bollards near the water's edge glimmered in the light of 2 lamps on high posts. Behind them, the mists in the flat fields were now above the hedges, but the water before them was dark, with only a few curling wisps of steam among the reeds by the bank. There seemed to be less fog on the further side. Mary led the pony over a gangway onto the ferry, and the others followed. Mary then pushed slowly off with a long pole. The brandy-wine flowed slow and broad before them. On the other side, the bank was steep, and up it a winding path climbed from the further landing. Lamps were twinkling there. Behind loomed up the Buck Hill, and out of it, through stray shrouds of mist, shone many round windows, yellow and red. They were the windows of Brandy Hall, the ancient home of the Brandybucks. Long ago, Gorindad Oldbuck, head of the Oldbuck family, one of the oldest in the Marish, or indeed in the Shire, had crossed the river, which was the original boundary of the land eastwards. He built and excavated Brandy Hall, changed his name to Brandybuck, and settled down to become master of what was virtually a small independent country. His family grew and grew, and after his days continued to grow, until Brandy Hall occupied the whole of the low hill and had 3 large front doors, many side doors, and about 100 windows. The Brandybucks and their numerous dependents then began to burrow, and later to build all round about. That was the origin of Buckland, a thickly inhabited strip between the river and the old forest, a sort of colony from the Shire. Its chief village was Bucklebury, clustering in the banks and slopes behind Brandy Hall. The people in the Marish were friendly with the Bucklanders, and the authority of the Master of the Hall, as the head of the Brandybuck family was called, was still acknowledged by the farmers between Stock and Rushy. But most of the folk of the old Shire regarded the Bucklanders as peculiar, half foreigners as it were, though as a matter of fact, they were not very different from the other hobbits of the Four Farthings, except in one point. They were fond of boats, and some of them could swim. Their land was originally unprotected from the east, but on that side they had built a hedge, the High Hay. It had been planted many generations ago, and was now thick and tall, for it was constantly tended. It ran all the way from Brandywine Bridge in a big loop, curving away from the river to Hayes End, where the Withywindle flowed out of the forest into the Brandywine, well over 20 miles from end to end. But of course, it was not a complete protection. The forest drew close to the hedge in some places. The Bucklanders kept their doors locked after dark, and that also was not usual in the Shire. The ferry boat moved slowly across the water. The Buckland shore drew nearer. Sam was the only member of the party who had not been over the river before. He had a strange feeling as the slow, gurgling stream slipped by. His old life lay behind in the mists. Dark adventure lay in front. He scratched his head, and for a moment had a passing wish that Mr. Frodo could have gone on living quietly at Bag End. The four hobbits stepped off the ferry. Merry was tying it up, and Pippin was already leading the pony up the path, when Sam, who had been looking back as if to take farewell of the Shire, said in a hoarse whisper,
"Look, Mr. Frodo, do you see anything?"
On the far stage, under the distant lamps, they could just make out a figure. It looked like a dark black bundle left behind. But as they looked, it seemed to move and sway this way and that, as if searching the ground. It then crawled, or went crouching, back into the gloom beyond the lamps.
"What in the Shire is that?"
exclaimed Merry. "Something that is following us," said Frodo. "But don't ask any more now. Let's get away at once." They hurried up the path to the top of the bank, and when they looked back, the far shore was shrouded in mist, and nothing could be seen. "Thank goodness you don't keep any boats on the west bank," said Frodo. "Can horses cross the river?"
"They can go 10 miles north to Brandywine Bridge, or they might swim," answered Merry, "though I never heard of any horse swimming the Brandywine. But what have horses got to do with it?"
"I'll tell you later. Let's get indoors, and then we can talk."
"All right. You and Pippin know your way, so I'll just ride on and tell Fatty Bolger that you're coming. We'll see about supper and things."
"We had our supper early with Farmer Maggot," said Frodo, "but we could do with another."
"You shall have it. Give me that basket,"
said Merry, and rode ahead into the darkness. It was some distance from the Brandywine to Frodo's new house at Crick Hollow. They passed Buck Hill and Brandy Hall on their left, and on the outskirts of Bucklebury struck the main road of Buckland that ran south from the bridge. Half a mile northward, along this, they came to a lane opening on their right. This they followed for a couple of miles, as it climbed up and down into the country. At last, they came to a narrow gate in a thick hedge. Nothing could be seen of the house in the dark. It stood back from the lane in the middle of a wide circle of lawn, surrounded by a belt of low trees inside the outer hedge. Frodo had chosen it because it stood in an out-of-the-way corner of the country, and there were no other dwellings close by. You could get in and out without being noticed. It had been built a long while before by the Brandybucks, for the use of guests or members of the family that wished to escape from the crowded life of Brandy Hall for a time. It was an old-fashioned, countrified house, as much like a hobbit hole as possible. It was long and low, with no upper story, and it had a roof of turf, round windows, and a large round door. As they walked up the green path from the gate, no light was visible. The windows were dark and shuttered. Frodo knocked on the door, and Fatty Bolger opened it. A friendly light streamed out. They slipped in quickly and shut themselves in the light inside. They were in a wide hall, with doors on either side. In front of them, a passage ran back down the middle of the house.
"Well, what do you think of it?"
asked Merry, coming up the passage.
"We have done our best in a short time to make it look like home. After all, Fatty and I only got here with the last cartload yesterday."
Frodo looked round. It did look like home. Many of his own favorite things, or Bilbo's things, they reminded him sharply of him in their new setting, were arranged as nearly as possible as they had been at Bag End. It was a pleasant, comfortable, welcoming place, and he found himself wishing that he was really coming here to settle down in quiet retirement. It seemed unfair to have put his friends to all this trouble, and he wondered again how he was going to break the news to them that he must leave them so soon, indeed at once. Yet that would have to be done that very night, before they all went to bed. "It's delightful," he said with an effort. "I hardly feel I have moved at all." The travelers hung up their cloaks and piled their packs on the floor. Mary led them down the passage and threw open a door at the far end. Firelight came out, and a puff of steam. "A bath!" cried Pippin. "Oh, blessed Meriadoc!" "What order shall we go in?" said Frodo. "Eldest first or quickest first? You'll be last either way, Master Peregrine."
"Trust me to arrange things better than that," said Mary. "You can't begin life at Crick Hollow with a quarrel over baths. In that room there are 3 tubs, and a copper full of boiling water. There are also towels, mats, and soap. Get inside and be quick."
Mary and Fatty went into the kitchen on the other side of the passage and busied themselves with the final preparations for a late supper. Snatches of competing songs came from the bathroom, mixed with the sound of splashing and wallowing. The voice of Pippin was suddenly lifted up above the others in one of Bilbo's favorite bath songs. "Sing, hey, for the bath at close of day that washes the weary mud away. Alone is he that will not sing. Oh, water hot is a noble thing. Oh, sweet is the sound of falling rain in the brook that leaps from hill to plain. But better than rain or rippling streams is water hot that smokes and steams. Oh, water cold we may pour at need down a thirsty throat and be glad indeed. But better is beer if drink we lack, and water hot poured down the back. Oh, water is fair that leaps on high on a fountain white beneath the sky. But never did fountain sound so sweet as splashing hot water with my feet." There was a terrific splash and a shout of "Whoa!" from Frodo. It appeared that a lot of Pippin's bath had imitated a fountain and leapt on high. Mary went to the door.
"What about supper and beer in the throat?"
he called. Frodo came out drying his hair. "There's so much water in the air, I'm coming into the kitchen to finish," he said.
"Lawks!"
said Mary, looking in. The stone floor was swimming.
"You ought to mop all that up before you get anything to eat, Peregrine," he said. "Hurry up, or we shan't wait for you."
They had supper in the kitchen, on a table near the fire.
"I suppose you won't want mushrooms again?"
said Fredegar, without much hope. "Yes, we shall," cried Pippin. "They're mine," said Frodo. "Given to me by Mrs. Maggot, a queen among farmers' wives. Take your greedy hands away, and I'll serve them." Hobbits have a passion for mushrooms, surpassing even the greediest likings of big people, a fact which partly explains young Frodo's long expeditions to the renowned fields of the Marish and the wrath of the injured maggot. On this occasion, there was plenty for all, even according to Hobbit standards. There were also many other things to follow, and when they had finished, even Fatty Bolger heaved a sigh of content. They pushed back the table and drew chairs round the fire.
"We'll clear up later," said Mary. "Now, tell me all about it. I guess that you have been having adventures, which was not quite fair without me. I want a full account, and most of all, I want to know what was the matter with old Maggot, and why he spoke to me like that. He sounded almost as if he was scared, if that was possible."
"We've all been scared," said Pippin after a pause, in which Frodo stared at the fire and did not speak. "You would have been too, if you had been chased for 2 days by black riders."
"And what are they?"
"Black figures, riding on black horses," answered Pippin. "If Frodo won't talk, I will tell you the whole tale from the beginning." He then gave a full account of their journey from the time when they left Hobbiton. Sam gave various supporting nods and exclamations. Frodo remained silent.
"I should think you are making it all up," said Mary. "If I had not seen that black shape on the landing stage, and heard the queer sound in Maggot's voice. What do you make of it all, Frodo?"
"Cousin Frodo has been very close," said Pippin. "The time has come for him to open out. So far we have been given nothing more to go on than Farmer Maggot's guess that it has something to do with old Bilbo's treasure." "That was only a guess," said Frodo hastily. Maggot does not know anything.
Old Maggot is a shrewd fellow, said Merry. A lot goes on behind his round face that does not come out in his talk. I've heard that he used to go into the forest at one time, and he has the reputation of knowing a good many strange things. But you can at least tell us, Frodo, whether you think his guess was good or bad.
I think, answered Frodo slowly, that it was a good guess, as far as it goes. There is a connection with Bilbo's old adventures, and the riders are looking, or perhaps one ought to say, searching for him, or for me. I also fear, if you want to know, that it is no joke at all, that I am not safe here or anywhere else. He looked round at the windows and walls, as if he was afraid that they would suddenly give way. The others looked at him in silence, and exchanged meaningful glances among themselves. "It's coming out in a minute," whispered Pippin to Merry. Merry nodded. "Well," said Frodo at last, sitting up and straightening his back as if he had made a decision, "I can't keep it dark any longer. I've got something to tell you all, but I don't know quite how to begin."
"I think I could help you," said Merry quietly, "by telling you some of it myself."
"What do you mean?" said Frodo, looking at him anxiously.
"Just this, my dear Frodo. You are miserable, because you don't know how to say goodbye. You meant to leave the Shire, of course, but danger has come on you sooner than you expected, and now you are making up your mind to go at once, and you don't want to. We are very sorry for you."
Frodo opened his mouth and shut it again. His look of surprise was so comical that they laughed. "Dear Frodo," said Pippin, "do you really think you had thrown dust in all our eyes? You have not been nearly careful or clever enough for that. You've obviously been planning to go, and saying farewell to all your haunts all this year since April. We've constantly heard you muttering, 'Shall I ever look down into that valley again, I wonder?' and things like that, and pretending that you had come to the end of your money, and actually selling your beloved bag end to those Sackville Bagginses, and all those close talks with Gandalf." "Good heavens," said Frodo, "I thought I had been both careful and clever. I don't know what Gandalf would say. Is all the Shire discussing my departure, then?"
"Oh, no," said Merry. "Don't worry about that. The secret won't keep for long, of course, but at the present it is, I think, only known to us conspirators. After all, you must remember that we know you well, and are often with you. We can usually guess what you are thinking. I knew Bilbo, too. To tell you the truth, I have been watching you rather closely ever since he left. I thought you would go after him sooner or later. Indeed, I expected you to go sooner, and lately we have been very anxious. We have been terrified that you might give us the slip, and go off suddenly all on your own like he did. Ever since this spring, we have kept our eyes open, and done a good deal of planning on our own account. You are not going to escape so easily."
"But I must go," said Frodo. "It cannot be helped, dear friends. It is wretched for us all, but it is no use your trying to keep me. Since you've guessed so much, please help me and do not hinder me." "You don't understand," said Pippin. "You must go, and therefore we must too. Merry and I are coming with you. Sam is an excellent fellow, and would jump down a dragon's throat to save you, if he did not trip over his own feet. But you will need more than one companion in your dangerous adventure." "My dear and most beloved hobbits," said Frodo, deeply moved, "but I could not allow it. I decided that long ago, too. You speak of danger, but you do not understand. This is no treasure hunt, no there and back journey. I'm flying from deadly peril into deadly peril."
"Of course we understand," said Merry firmly. "That is why we've decided to come. We know the ring is no laughing matter, but we're going to do our best to help you against the enemy."
"The ring?" said Frodo, now completely amazed.
"Yes, the ring," said Merry. "My dear old hobbit, you don't allow for the inquisitiveness of friends. I have known about the existence of the ring for years, before Bilbo went away, in fact. But since he obviously regarded it as a secret, I kept the knowledge in my head, until we formed our conspiracy. I did not know Bilbo, of course, as well as I know you. I was too young, and he was always more careful. But he was not careful enough. If you want to know how I first found out, I will tell you."
"Go on," said Frodo faintly.
"It was the Sackville Bagginses that were his downfall, as you might expect. One day, a year before the party, I happened to be walking along the road when I saw Bilbo ahead. Suddenly, in the distance, the SBs appeared, coming towards us. Bilbo slowed down, and then, hey presto, he vanished. I was so startled that I hardly had the wits to hide myself in a more ordinary fashion, but I got through the hedge and walked along the field inside. I was peeping through into the road after the SBs had passed. I was looking straight at Bilbo when he suddenly reappeared. I got a glint of gold as he put something back in his trouser pocket. After that, I kept my eyes open. In fact, I confess that I spied. But you must admit that it was very intriguing, and I was only in my teens. I must be the only one in the Shire, beside you, Frodo, that has ever seen the old fellow's secret book.
You have read his book? Cried Frodo. Good heavens above! Is nothing safe?
Not too safe, I should say, said Merry. But I've only had one rapid glance, and that was difficult to get. He never left the book about. I wonder what became of it. I should like another look. Have you got it, Frodo?
No, it was not at the back end. He must have taken it away.
Well, as I was saying, Merry proceeded, I kept my knowledge to myself until this spring when things got serious. Then we formed our conspiracy, and as we were serious too, and meant business, we have not been too scrupulous. You are not a very easy nut to crack, and Gandalf is worse. But if you want to be introduced to our chief investigator, I can produce him.
Where is he? Said Frodo, looking round, as if he expected a masked and sinister figure to come out of the cupboard.
Step forward, Sam,
said Merry, and Sam stood up with a face scarlet up to the ears.
Here's our chief collector of information. He collected a lot, I can tell you, before he was finally caught. After which I may say he seemed to regard himself as on parole and dried up.
Sam! Cried Frodo, feeling the amazement could go no further, and quite unable to decide whether he felt angry, amused, relieved, or merely foolish.
Yes, sir, said Sam. Begging your pardon, sir, but I meant no wrong to you, Mr. Frodo, nor to Mr. Gandalf for that matter. He has some sense, mind you, and when you said, go alone, he said, no, take someone as you can trust.
But it does not seem I can trust anyone, said Frodo. Sam looked at him unhappily.
It all depends on what you want, put in Merry. You can trust us to stick to you through thick and thin, to the bitter end. And you can trust us to keep any secret of yours closer than you keep it yourself. But you cannot trust us to let you face trouble alone, and go off without a word. We're your friends, Frodo. Anyway, there it is. We know most of what Gandalf has told you. We know a good deal about the ring. We are horribly afraid, but we are coming with you, or following you like hounds. And after all, sir, added Sam, you did ought to take the elves' advice. Gildor said you should take them as was willing, and you can't deny it.
I don't deny it, said Frodo, looking at Sam, who was now grinning. I don't deny it. But I'll never believe you are sleeping again, whether you snore or not. I shall kick you hard to make sure. You are a set of deceitful scoundrels, he said, turning to the others. But bless you, he laughed, getting up and waving his arms. I give in. I will take Gildor's advice. If the danger were not so dark, I should dance for joy. Even so, I cannot help feeling happy, happier than I have felt for a long time. I dreaded this evening.
Good, that's settled. 3 cheers for Captain Frodo and company,
they shouted, and they danced round him. Merry and Pippin began a song, which they had apparently got ready for the occasion. It was made on the model of the dwarf song that started Bilbo on his adventure long ago, and went to the same tune. Farewell we call to hearth and hall, the wind may blow and rain may fall. We must away ere break of day, far over wood and mountain tall.
To Rivendell, where elves yet dwell, in glades beneath the misty fell. Through moor and waste we ride in haste, and whither then we cannot tell.
With foes ahead, behind us dread, beneath the sky shall be our bed. until at last our toil be past, our journey done, our errand sped. We must away, we must away, we ride before the break of day. Very good, said Frodo. But in that case, there are a lot of things to do before we go to bed. Under a roof, for tonight at any rate. Oh, that was poetry, said Pippin. Do you really mean to start before the break of day? I don't know, answered Frodo. I fear those black riders, and I'm sure it is unsafe to stay in one place long, especially in a place to which it is known I was going. Also, Gildor advised me not to wait. But I should very much like to see Gandalf. I could see that even Gildor was disturbed when he heard that Gandalf had never appeared. It really depends on two things. How soon could the riders get to Bucklebury? And how soon could we get off? It'll take a good deal of preparation.
The answer to the second question, said Merry, is that we could get off in an hour. I've prepared practically everything. There are 5 ponies in a stable across the fields. Stores and tackle are all packed, except for a few extra clothes, and the perishable food.
It seems to have been a very efficient conspiracy, said Frodo. But what about the Black Riders? Would it be safe to wait 1 day for Gandalf?
That all depends on what you think the riders would do if they found you here, answered Merry. They could have reached here by now, of course, if they were not stopped at the north gate, where the hedge runs down to the river bank just to the side of the bridge. The gate guards would not let them through by night, though they may break through. Even in the daylight they would try to keep them out, I think. At any rate, until they got message through to the master of the hall, for they would not like the look of the riders, and would certainly be frightened of them. But of course, Buckland cannot resist a determined attack for long, and it is possible that in the morning, even a black rider that rode up and asked for Mr. Baggins would be let through. It is pretty generally known that you are coming back to live at Crickhollow.
Frodo sat for a while and thought. I have made up my mind, he said finally. I am starting tomorrow, as soon as it is light. But I am not going by road. It would be safer to wait here than that. If I go through the north gate, my departure from Buckland will be known at once, instead of being secret for several days at least, as it might be. And what is more, the bridge and the east road near the borders will certainly be watched, whether any rider gets into Buckland or not. We don't know how many there are, but there are at least 2, and possibly more. And the only thing to do is to go off in a quite unexpected direction.
But that can only mean going into the old forest, said Fredegar, horrified. You can't be thinking of doing that. It is quite as dangerous as black riders.
Not quite, said Merry. It sounds very desperate, but I believe Frodo is right. It is the only way of getting off without being followed at once. With luck, we might get a considerable start.
But you won't have any luck in the old forest, objected Fredegar. No one ever has luck in there. You'll get lost. People don't go in there.
Oh, yes, they do, said Merry. The Brandybucks go in, occasionally when the fit takes them. We have a private entrance. Frodo went in once long ago. I've been in several times, usually in the daylight, of course, when the trees are sleepy and fairly quiet.
Well, do as you think best, said Fredegar. I'm more afraid of the old forest than of anything I know about. The stories about it are a nightmare, but my vote hardly counts, as I am not going on the journey. Still, I'm very glad someone is stopping behind, who can tell Gandalf about what you've done, when he turns up, as I'm sure he will before long.
Fond as he was of Frodo, Fatty Bolger had no desire to leave the Shire, nor to see what lay outside it. His family came from the East Farthing, from Budgeford and Bridgefields, in fact, but he had never been over the Brandywine Bridge. His task, according to the original plans of the conspirators, was to stay behind and deal with inquisitive folk, and to keep up as long as possible the pretense that Mr. Baggins was still living at Crickhollow. He had even brought along some old clothes of Frodo's to help him in playing the part. They little thought of how dangerous that part might prove. "Excellent," said Frodo when he understood the plan. "We could not have left any message behind for Gandalf otherwise. I don't know if these riders can read or not, of course, but I should not have dared to risk a written message, in case they got in and searched the house. But if Fatty is willing to hold the fort, and I can be sure of Gandalf knowing the way we have gone, That decides me. I'm going into the old forest, first thing tomorrow. Well, that's that, said Pippin. On the whole, I'd rather have our job than Fatty's, waiting here until black riders come.
You wait until you're well inside the forest, said Fredegar. You'll wish you were back here with me before this time tomorrow.
It's no good arguing about it any more, said Mary. We have still got to tidy up and put the finishing touches to the packing before we go to bed. I shall call you all before the break of day.
When at last he had got to bed, Frodo could not sleep for some time. His legs ached. He was glad that he was riding in the morning. Eventually he fell into a vague dream, in which he seemed to be looking out of a high window over a dark sea of tangled trees. Down below among the roots there was the sound of creatures crawling and snuffling. He felt sure they would smell him out sooner or later. Then he heard a noise in the distance. At first he thought it was a great wind coming over the leaves of the forest. Then he knew that it was not leaves, but the sound of the sea far off, a sound he had never heard in waking life, though it had often troubled his dreams. Suddenly, he found he was out in the open. There were no trees after all. He was on a dark heath, and there was a strange salt smell in the air. Looking up, he saw before him a tall white tower, standing alone on a high ridge. Great desire came over him to climb up the tower and see the sea. He started to struggle up the ridge towards the tower, but suddenly a light came in the sky, and there was a noise of thunder. Come on! I was so funny.
Always happens.
Ah, I was making such good jokes, and you guys were missing
Okay.
out. You know what? You guys don't get to hear those. That was just for Molly.
Yeah. Secret jokes. I'm Molly. This is my dog Winston. He
Yeah,
heard
this
it.
is
He
a-
heard that grip and
This
bang,
is a
and he was like,
dog-only podcast. Not
I've
a
got to get
podcast.
in on this. I have to bark at Mr. Frodo.
Has to.
Yeah.
But yes, welcome everyone. Welcome back. I'm joined by Molly Ostertag, and we will just be talking about whatever really comes to mind. I do have a few opening questions that I usually
Okay.
aim at guests. So, first off, very basic. When and how did you first get into Tolkien?
Tolkien, for me, I think, like a lot of us, my dad read it to me, which actually, I love hearing it with the voices again, because my dad would do that too. I think he read The Hobbit first, and then Lord of the Rings, and I kind of remember, like, learning to read by following it, so I must have been pretty young at the time. But yeah, I think I think because of that, like, I was really young, and it just has this feeling of, like, just like a fairy tale from the distant past. Oh my god. He's very heavy. Yeah, and then the movies came out. I'm 28, so the movies came out when I was like 9, 10, 11 or something like that, and that was like a perfect age to just be like, all right, this is my new obsession. I'm going to learn Elvish. I'm going to like fully commit to this world. So yeah, it's been like on and off for me. This is an on period. I think for a while I was like, Lord of the Rings is too nerdy. I'm gonna try to be cool and like not talk about how much I like it. And then the last couple of years, I realized how dumb that was, and it's been just been in it ever since.
It goes in cycles for me too. Like all my different obsessions. Like usually it's like it used to be like my obsession with Game of Thrones, and then I got really disappointed by Game of Thrones, so never again.
Yeah.
But like it would be like A Song of Ice and Fire in like the spring spring and summer when like Game of Thrones is out on its season. Then like fall would be Lord of the Rings, because I'd get that autumn urge that like Frodo has. Like September comes around and I'm like, oh, I gotta read the Lord of the Rings again.
Absolutely.
And then like winter would come around, and recently with like the Star Wars movies coming out, I'm like, oh, I'm grabbing my lightsaber, let's go. The prequels were best, I don't care.
Yeah.
But yeah, like this time, like Lord of the Rings has stuck. It's just,
yeah.
I don't know.
It's the only one that I'm like, it's the only fandom I've ever, I mean, I've never even really been in it before. Like, this is kind of my first foray, like, into fandom culture, and it's been really, really cute and fun. But, like, it's definitely the thing that I am just, like, it has been the most enduring obsession. Like, I feel like I was into Harry Potter, like, every kid my age was. Like, obviously now I am, like, I will never read Harry Potter again. I know, like, it is just, like, dead to me. And it's even, like, realizing that I'm like, oh, they're fine. Like, they're, like, fun books, but they're not, like, I don't, like,
they're not the
take a lot from
grand,
them.
like, epic. that
Yeah,
draws
and
you
it's
in.
really cool to go back to Lord of the Rings, especially right now, and like there's like so many themes that are relevant and so many things that really hit home. So yeah, it feels like it's like my serious love. I'm definitely more committed to it than anything else.
How did like COVID kind of bring it back? Because I feel like for me, like I started doing, well, first off, I gotta give a shout out to my friend Erin. She's been doing a reread of her own, but her reread is like she reads something, and then every other paragraph she's like, okay, one sec, I need to rant about something real quick. And
that is also how I feel.
I know.
It's fun.
Like it's very endearing, and they are like they've really pulled me in. But like around summer, like COVID's happening, I am down to 4 work days a week. I have an extra day to do absolutely nothing. I'm like, what am I really gonna do about this? And
Yeah.
around that time, I got pulled back into Lord of the Rings Online, which is probably the best Lord of the Rings video game ever made, lore-wise and story-wise. And then I'm just like, you know, I'm gonna stick with it. And then around that time, you started like posting like pictures and stuff, and I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, I was also going
I
down.
see you also have an obsession. Allow me to talk about it.
Like, there's a really great Renaissance fair in Los Angeles. I think it's the biggest one in America, and we always go. Like, my wife and I go every summer, and we like dress up, do the whole thing. You like drink out of horns and like arm wrestle with bards and like watch. And it's just like I sort of get all of that like fantasy bullshit out like in that moment. And it was canceled this year, of course.
Yeah.
And we usually like do that and then like watch Lord of the Rings, and like it's just like a fun summer thing. And so yeah, we were like, okay, instead of that, like we'll have our friend over, we'll watch Lord of the Rings, we'll dress up, we'll do the costumes, and like that will be our Renaissance Fair day. But then it was like, oh, this is only the beginning of something.
Yeah, this isn't ending anytime soon.
Yeah, but I think it's just like, it's a story about hope, and it's a story about despair and the seductiveness of despair. Like so many of the themes are characters flirting with the idea of giving into despair. And it also is like, to me at least, there's this very like anti-war message and this very kind of like empathy to it that I just found it really, really comforting in this time. And also it was just like this huge world that I felt like I could dig into, and like it's been really fun getting into the lore because I've never gone there as much.
Yeah.
And so just being like, oh, there's so much here, like it's really a fantasy world I can just escape to right now.
Yeah,
it's very nice.
I feel similar about missing the Ren Fair, because my friends and I, we had already gotten costumes together for the Ren Fair in Kenosha, Wisconsin this year, and it was just like we were hyped, and then it's like, nope, COVID. So like my one friend and her husband, she's like, well, why don't you guys just come stay with us for a few days? So we went up there, and we didn't even watch Lord of the Rings. I think we watched Shrek 2 when we were very drunk. It is when I made up the idea of meeches, which is meat peaches, and I was disliked for the rest of the weekend. Yeah, it is. It's like comfort food, you know, like Lord of the Rings. It's like, I want to say it's like cheesy potatoes, where it's like filling and warm, and you're like, this is familiar, but also like you never like whenever you get it, like after a little while, you're just like, oh, like it brings back memories. It's very nostalgic for me, but also like the more I read it every time and again, I find something new as I get older. In my old age of 23 years old. But like. Yeah,
no, but it really is. It's more than comfort for me, because I think it's like comfort food media for me is very much like reality TV shows and stuff, and like Great British Bake Off. And it's like there's something, it just like really makes me think, and it really makes me very inspired. And I haven't read the books since I was like for like 10 years, so it was really cool to reread them and just be like, these themes that I love in the movie are here like tenfold, and there's so much more to them.
Yeah.
And there's so much more about, I think I just love it because it valorizes like these like humble traits. Like I just love that like the hobbits are the heroes, and they are like the simplest, most humble, least powerful people. And that's kind of like really, really cathartic to read right now.
Like the fact that they're able to just not take themselves very seriously, and that's kind of what makes them heroic. Like, of course, Frodo has to take himself seriously because so much weight is on him.
Yeah.
But you look at like Merry and Pippin, and they're just having a lark for a lot of the time. Like, it's
they get captured by orcs, and
they're on vacation.
They don't even get away. They crawl away, and their hands are still tied, and they're like, let's have some food. Let's chit chat for a bit. It's amazing.
Let's make friends with this big tree. Like, this
like you have to, you can be in these very dark times, and you still have to like connect with people and like take care of yourself, and that's like a very Hobbit lesson, I think.
And even like and Sam has his small moments of levity where he's like, you know what you need, Mr. Frodo? A nice home-cooked meal. That's what you need right now. And you're just like...
Frodo's like, we are in Mordor. Sam... It's good. It's really good. And like, obviously I love them. I love those two so much. But there's something about like making it so like, whether you read it as romantic or friendship, like that kind of devotion to someone is so beautiful. And that kind of like Frodo being like, I'm going to take the ring and I'm going to try as hard as I can. And he like, at a certain point, he stops believing that he's going to succeed. Like, I think it's about like when he splits off from the rest of the party, he's like, I'm not going to make it, but I have to keep going as far as I can. And Sam is just like that's Frodo's belief. And Frodo's like, I just have to keep going. And then Sam is like, I just have to keep Mr. Frodo going. And it's like they don't have to like be like holding on to hope all the time or like feeling really noble all the time. They just are like very determined and like one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. It's very because I always say like Sam is the Shire that Frodo takes with him. Like Sam is
Yeah.
the embodiment of the Shire. He's a gardener. He's all about plants, all about home cooking. He's all about these very like wholesome things that he like Frodo needs with him to keep reminding him of home.
Yeah.
Uh, Frodo's idea is I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna throw the ring in, and that's the end of his thinking. While
Yeah.
Sam's thinking of Bilbo and saying we're going there and back again.
I
Like
know.
we're not ending there, we're going back, and it's just
Yeah.
Frodo needs Sam, and it's
It's
just
really, really good. I mean, it really is. This isn't my thought. I don't know who I saw a tweet that was just like Frodo is like the mental ring bearer and Sam is the physical ring bearer, and it's like the two of them together are
Yeah.
like one ring bearer, and it's very sweet. I really, really like it.
Now, one thing that you have made yourself famous on Twitter for is, of course, your excellent art of shipping Frodo and Sam together.
Yes.
When, or if it was always there, when was it where you kind of like, did you kind of realize this is romantic love? Like, when you thought, like, this can be read as romantic? Because I'm clueless straight guy where I'm just like, aw, such good friends. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, but then I start seeing, like, other things. I'm like, oh my god. Like, you read it. And, like, it's in the text of, like, he holds Frodo's hand. I'm like, well, that's a bit too
It is in the
soft.
text.
That's very soft.
It is in the text. He says I love him in the
Yes.
text. It's fine. Well, I think, it's funny because like maybe you're like a little bit young to remember this, but like when the movies came out, being in middle school, gay was like something that people threw around a lot as a word to just be like, just mean like stupid or whatever. Like it was, and
That's
it was like,
gay, dude. It's like,
yeah, exactly. It was very, very common. And like everybody was like, oh, that movie is so gay. Like those two are so gay. So I think I was always a little bit
defensive.
like embarrassed by them. Like I didn't quite appreciate their parts as much as a kid and like as a teen. And like Sam, especially, I was like, oh, he's like kind of clumsy and like kind of like simple, and it's just a little, I don't know, it felt like a little bit vulnerable to like him so much. And then watching it like once I was like with my wife, we like when we watched it together for the first time, Noelle was kind of like going through a difficult time, and like I was like being a very like supportive partner at the time, and like really kind of like finding that in myself because I never had a relationship like that before where I wanted to like support, like be that supportive.
Yeah.
And I just like I watched it at exactly the right time, and it hit me like an arrow to the heart of just like how lovely it was that is Sam's heroism, and that it's like I think that was the kind of thing that I always like felt like I didn't want to give to a partner before, and then to be like, oh, this is the person that I really love and I really want to support them, and like I can see it as being heroic in this movie. Like that was like it was like very, very intense, like what's it
Epiphany?
called when you like imprint on a character super hard.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that's what it was. So yeah, and then I think that was hit me with the feels. I drew a bunch of fan art that year. The next year we watched it again with a friend who was really into the lore, and she was like, oh, and Sam ends up in the Undying Lands, like at the end. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, no, look. And I like took down the book and like looked to the appendices, and then I was like, okay, I've officially lost my mind. And so then I made like a comic about it, and then this year I just won.
You let loose.
I'm just still going. Yeah.
It's just, yeah. Tolkien is really good at just making, like, characters, like, character interactions that you're just like, this is such a wholesome, like, you have, like, the sibling protection between, like, Merry and Pippin, where they're, like, Merry's the older brother and Pippin's the younger brother, and I feel like, though, like, you certainly have, like, the more romantic
I didn't
between.
get that until I read the book either. Like I always read them as friends in the movie, and then like reading it and being like, oh, they like grew up together and they're like cousins. So
like,
cute.
You realize like how like when they get separated, Mary is just like kind of frantic and like, I'm the older sibling and I'm supposed to take care of him. And then when like Pippin finds him after the battle and it's like, I'm gonna take care of you, and you're like, Yes.
It's so good. It's so good, and it's like I think it's funny. Like I love to, have a glass of wine in the evening and like rile up like the homophobic Catholics on Twitter, and like get into little fights with them. But like I genuinely think it is totally valid to read it as this beautiful friendship as well between Sam and Frodo. I just see it as like, to me as a gay person, I'm like, there's this extra level.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, it just is, the relationship itself is what is beautiful. It's like that kind of devotion and that kind of
Selflessness.
wanting to care for someone, and like not being able to help them with, like not being able to like do everything for them or fix what's going wrong in their minds, but or what's going on in the world, but to like do as much as you can. Like it's beautiful, whatever kind of relationship it is.
Mm-hmm.
Love
Yeah,
it.
it's just so sweet.
I love it so much.
I do find that now that I've gotten older, I've gained an appreciation for the early chapters,
Mm-hmm.
where it's just like this very nice domestic setting. Like the first chapter is a big party,
Yeah.
and it's just everyone's having fun, and like the worst thing there is the Sackville Bagginses, but they
Yeah.
get pulled off real early, and it's just
Well, and I love that there's I didn't realize this until I finished the book and like read The Scouring of the Shire. The idea that is like so precious, and that is like, it's not, both, there's like an idea in the book that's not in the movie, which is that the Shire is protected even though they don't realize it. Like the Rangers are protecting the Shire. And so it's like this kind of idyllic pastoral setting doesn't just happen. Like it is a lot of quiet, hard work that goes into it.
yeah.
And then I love that they have to go back and defend it and be like, these things, these simple domestic things, they are not, it's not treasure, it's not honor, it's not royalty, but it's like, they are still worth fighting for and like really worth holding on to. There's something very cool about that to me, and very like unique to Lord of the Rings. I don't think you see it in a lot of fantasy.
Yeah.
Um,
It's also very interesting because like you see like Hobbit society, and there's not really like, it's a weird. Whenever I think of the Hobbits, I think of that little video of like the anarchist guy who's like, "What kind of bullshit is that?" And he goes, "Oops, my anarchy symbol." Where it's just like they
I don't
have
think
this-
I've seen that.
Oh, it's. I'll probably share it on Twitter. Just
Okay.
but, like, it's like they're a very almost kind of anarch, but there's like also it's so hard to describe because Tolkien lived in like a classist society. So,
Yeah.
like, everyone knew their place, and so
Yeah.
he kind of puts that into his like books, but at the same time, you don't really see much evidence of it. Like,
Yeah.
you have the Thane of the Shire, and you have the Master of Buckland, and you have the Mayor of the Shire, which is an elected position. But none of them have any real power. Like,
yeah,
the
and
Mayor.
like especially when they get back and they're scouring the Shire, and it's just like everyone's like, what are these sheriffs doing here? Like
Yeah.
the sheer level of offense that the hobbits take at people telling them what to do
Mhm.
is very cool and very anarchist, I think.
Yeah, it's. And, like, how initially there's only supposed to be 2 sheriffs, and most of the time
Yeah.
they're just walking around, visiting pubs, and just checking
Yeah.
in on people. And,
Yeah.
like, they have, like, a border patrol, but only basically for wild animals to kind of shoo them off. It's like.
Yeah.
It's a very.
It's really interesting. Yeah. Well, and I love too how, like, Aragorn is such a, like, reluctant and cautious king, and like really doesn't want to claim his power. And once he gets it, he gives away a lot of his power. Like it's I don't know. There's something very interesting about like I really think like Tolkien's like root of evil is the idea that you can control other people, and that's like literally what the ring is, and it's what all the villains are in one way or another.
I believe he wrote somewhere, or there's like a recording of him on radio. Sometimes I've just like popped him on because he has kind of such a weird, soothing voice. In that, except it's such a rambly voice. Like he's like
Yeah.
making it up as he goes. But like he calls himself like a monarchist anarchist, where he enjoys the concept of a good king. But he's like, socially, I'm anarchist, where I don't really believe in the government involving itself too much in its citizens' lives. And it's
So interesting. It's
I'm
so
like, I gotta
interesting, yeah.
analyze you, man. I need to put you under a microscope and
I
just
know,
look at
that's
every
it's
bit
very
of you.
strange.
It's-
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I've kind of I haven't been like digging too deep into learning about Tolkien and like his life, but I feel like I'm just picking up little snippets, and he seems like a much more interesting and cool person than I don't know, thought at first.
He's a multifaceted person, like most people
Yeah.
are, but like you never really think of this stuff because you usually think, oh, he's a stuffy professor who. But then you're like, no, wait, no, he was just a big nerd who lost a lot of friends in a pointless war, and then you're like, man, his writings make sense now because of all that.
Yeah, he really writes as someone who is like very tired of war and like does not see anything glorious or exciting in it, which I think is like I know why the films make the battle so exciting, like their films, and like it's good, but it's like it's not there in the book. That's like an addition, I think. Like he really is not interested in the fighting. He's interested in like individual people defending other people and like defending what they believe in, but he is tired of war.
It's such a interesting concept, and like, again, a lot of lessons that we could probably implement today in our like this is one thing where I come back to it where I'm like, this is so comforting because the guy in charge is a good person who just wants people to be happy. And then meanwhile you look at our own political climate at the moment and you're like, my god, this is it definitely gives like not like a blueprint, but like this is what things could be like if we really tried.
Yeah, and I think that I feel like Saruman is a really interesting villain because I think he's a very modern villain of just being like, he's almost like he's like, Gandalf, I see where the wind's blowing, I see where the world is going, and I want to be on the side of that. And Gandalf is like, fuck no, we're not going to do that, we're going to fight against it. And I just think it's very, I feel like he's a very modern kind of like capitalistic villain in a way.
And there's so many different readings because a lot of times I have to remind myself like some of the, like the stuff in the like movies does not really line up with the books.
Yeah.
Because someone already mentioned this in the chat. You'll have to forgive some of the people who already watch me. I am in a Discord. I am the Aragorn defender. There's a lot of.
I love Aragorn.
Yeah, I love Aragorn too, but it's also like when you read the books, you kind of realize he's a lot more of a cocky dick than in like the movies.
Is he?
Yeah, like
what?
I don't know. I gotta let you talk to Aaron because they would like tear everything you know about elves and Aragorn apart because they are a steward defender. They are big supporters of Denethor because of how he's actually portrayed in the books, not the movies, in the books.
Interesting. I think he's sucks in the books too.
In the books.
Well, in the books, it's like he's been like radicalized on the dark web, you know?
Yeah.
He's looking at his Palantir too much.
Well, he's lost hope. That's the key.
Exactly. Yeah.
The thing is, like, he has put a lot into protecting Gondor and being the shield against everything else. But by doing so, by using the Palantir to like constantly be patrolling his borders, he's been vying with the will of Sauron, and Sauron's just a deceitful son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And so over time, like, the sad thing is, he loses hope completely, in which point he's like, what's the point? We can't win. I just want to die in dignity.
It's really true. Yeah, and that is... Yeah, it's just like...
And he still cares for Faramir in the books. And it's just...
Yeah, he's definitely more sympathetic in the book. Mm-hmm. I feel like he's really pissy towards Gandalf, so I'm always like, all right, Denethor.
Again, Aaron is also very pissy towards Gandalf. They're like, why doesn't he tell Frodo, like, how fucking dangerous this shit is? And I'm like, that's not the point, Aaron! Don't ruin my grandfather!
Listen, he has his ways of doing things. I love. I think Gandalf is right at all times.
Wizards work in mysterious ways. It's just...
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that's part of what makes it a fairy tale, and a comforting fairy tale is the idea that you could fix the world by putting something in a volcano.
Yeah.
And that like two small little people could like make it there and do it, and that would save things. When like in reality, I think, yeah, like when without that context, Denethor is a much more relatable character because, and like even Saruman is, I think, because it's like they are the people who are really trying to see things realistically and trying to make decisions based on the way the world is as they know it.
Yeah.
And Gandalf is the only one who like he says, like it's a fool's hope.
Yeah. It's,
yeah.
And it also, like, how a big key of like evil being defeated is through pity and mercy with the sparing of Smeagol.
Yeah.
And in the end, which you're always like, after like you have like the whole movie where Frodo kind of throws him over the edge and like there's reach, Mr. Frodo, and it's all like very beautiful. But then like you read the books and it's like, yeah, no, Gollum just is so fucking elated he has the ring, he dances a lot and then falls into the volcano. And you're kind of like, really? That's it? And Tolkien's like, yeah, that's it. He just falls.
Yeah.
The evil is its own undoing, basically.
Very much, yeah. Yeah, and I think I really like that scene in the movie, actually, because I like Frodo sort of getting lost. It makes more sense to me than why he sort of can't go back. Like, he's, like, fully broken. And I also like Sam getting him to reach and just... I have, like, my other head... I was telling you about my secret headcanon earlier, which I'll post tomorrow. But my other headcanon is that, like... So, like, when the ring was destroyed, it started a new age of the world, right? Like, the third age? Fourth age? Fourth age. And my theory that is totally just in my head is that, like, the manner in which the age begins, like, will set the tone of the age. And so that, like, the fact that Frodo did not die, the fact that he did choose to live, like, is setting this age on, like a track of, like, life and, like, choosing life.
That's very beautiful, though. It's very... It's just... Yeah, it's a sign of better things to come. Like...
Yeah, I feel like if he had died if he had been lost, it would have meant that things would be darker. But the fact that Sam saved him, like, and the fact that there was, like, this love present at, like, the moment at which this new age began, like, is, like, a good sign.
It does. It hits differently. All right. I'm just looking at chat, seeing if they have any good questions. Rackloss asks, does Molly like elves?
I do. Yeah, they're very interesting. I feel like when I read the Silmarillion, I'm gonna get a neat take on elves.
They are pieces of work. I mean,
yeah, I want to see them be a little messier.
You look at I mean, this will be kind of spoilers for Silmarillion, but to be fair, Lord of the Rings has spoilers for the Silmarillion in it.
Came out a very long time ago.
Like, one thing that you kind of look interested at is you're like, well, why don't the elves really go to war in the Third Age? Why is it just Rohan and Gondor? And you kind of look at it and you kind of realize they are kind of in the same position that Tolkien was in after World War I. They have lost... And the Silmarillion is not a happy story for the elves. It is a slow defeat, ending with, sure, the ultimate evil is overthrown, but Sauron survives, who continues to wreak havoc on the elves. He tricks them into making the magic rings, and this binds the fate of the world in those rings. But you're like, why doesn't Elrond get involved if he's so wise and so powerful? And it's like, well, he lost basically his pseudo father figures in Mithros and Maglor, who adopted him and his brother when their parents died. Well, didn't die; they went away. It's very complicated. He loses his brother, who chooses a mortal life and becomes like the first king of Numenor among men. Like,
that's why he's so sad at
Arwen, yes, because he's already lost one family member to it.
Everyone in my life.
He loses his wife when she gets ambushed by orcs, and she suffers so much that she has to go into the west to recover, and he can't see her again. And like, you look at Elrond, and he's like,
but he's gonna get to wait.
He gets to see her again. He gets to see her again, but it's very much like a Frodo going into the west and Sam having to stay behind.
Okay.
But like,
thank God.
Yeah, thank God. Whew. But like,
there is, like, I feel like another thing that really hit me on this viewing of Lord of the Rings and the elves is how much it is a story about like so many of the great cultures of this world are coming to an end, and like the world is kind of undergoing this slow apocalypse, and what they're kind of deciding is like who is going to take over next. Is it going to be a world of orcs or will it be a world of men? But it's definitely not going to be a world of elves and dwarves anymore.
Yeah.
And there's something so I just find it very inspiring and like tragic. I think like when you're interested in like social justice and when you're interested in like marginalized communities, of being like, I'm going to fight to make this world better, but it might not be better for me. Like I might not be the one who gets to enjoy the world, but I'm still going to fight for it. And so like there's something really beautiful about the elves.
Yeah.
In that they are trying to create this world for people and trying to guide the world onto a better track, but they also know that they eventually will have to give up power.
Like one of the interesting things that you realize are like Rivendell and Lothlorien are so surreal and so otherworldly is because both Elrond and Galadriel have the rings of power with them.
Yeah.
And so like when the one ring is destroyed, their rings lose their power, and Lothlorien like starts to fade. It's no longer this bright golden wood because Galadriel's like, I can't sustain it anymore. One beautiful line from the musical, the song Lothlorien, is all about how Galadriel loves, like she has created this bastion in Lothlorien with her magic, and she's like singing to it as if it's her child. Like she calls it her child, like I will protect you and all this stuff. But she can't without risking the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So she kind of.
It's a very like. I think it's a really good lesson to take away that sometimes. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's like a very interesting lesson to look at when you're like a privileged person in a scary world, is like, what do you have to give up? And what are things that are maybe beautiful and bring you joy and like a way of life that you love, but like ultimately like it cannot last because the world is changing. And kind of like, do you choose, like Galadriel has the choice of like, do I choose to fight back against that? And do I choose to take the ring and like try to continue like and maybe rule the entire world, or do I choose to diminish? And it's just like so many people, so many characters in those books choose to give up their power. Like the entire series is about giving up power, and they're like, that's like not classic fantasy. I just like no one who wrote Tolkien ripoffs like understood that like central message, which I think is very cool.
Yeah, it's all just very like gentle messaging of it's not about you, it's about others. Think of others.
And it's just like you have to think of like the greater good, and so often that just means like you can't hold on to power. All right,
Curious Curio 2, I believe. I know her on Twitter. Asks Molly, can we get some insight on Catboy Hobbits? The world craves more. Does Frodo need bread on Sam? I need to know.
You really missed the chance for a pun there. I mean, I just feel like they're very...
they spelled it need to... Oh, wait, no, they didn't spell it need to know. Damn it! Out of here, Curious Curio.
Missed opportunity.
Damn it.
I feel like it's very self-explanatory. I think hobbits could be a little bit more little creatures. Like if I was gonna make like a hobbit ripoff, I would probably make them a little fuzzy, give them little tails. I just feel like that it makes sense. I'm trying to think. Yeah, Frodo probably needs bread on Sam, because that is what cats do to like self-soothe when they're anxious, and so he probably would do that. It would be very
such a weird transition of us going, it's about love and gentleness and cat boys and
both, all encompassed.
I mean, and that's the beautiful thing about fandom. We can like switch on a dime to like something just ridiculous.
It's very delightful, like digging. It's been really delightful, like being a little part of like Lord of the Rings Twitter, and I hope I'm not too annoying on it. But it's just like I feel like everyone is just like so deep in it, but there's also such a sense of humor, and I really, really like that.
That's one beautiful thing that like even like Tolkien doesn't take himself too seriously, and a lot. Like Frodo is sassy. Like he is like shooting back like all
this. So sassy.
He's just sassy and very stupid. I'm sorry. Like he has wisdom, high wisdom, low intelligence. Basically,
It's so fucking funny that his friends are like, we know where you're going. You've been monologuing. You've been
Yeah,
staring
you've been
at
staring
the hills
wistfully at that valley. What else are we gonna think?
and like saying aloud, like, when shall I see it again?
Oh.
Like, we know.
Holding up a
Frodo.
skull. Alas, poor Yorick. It's just like,
I just fully know like who he would have been in high school. Like,
oh gosh, so melodramatic.
Yeah, I love him very much. I love that he's a weird hobbit. Like, I love that
He is.
we have Sam, and Sam is really holding down like the classic hobbit vibes, but Frodo is a little fancy, like a little more educated.
He's scholarly.
Like,
he takes after
talks
Bilbo, who's like, holy shit, let me tell you about all these languages that are never used anymore. And it's just like,
Bilbo is such a bitch. He's like, I can't deal with him. He's so ridiculous. In the Lord of the Rings books, especially, he's just like, all he ever talks about is himself and like his book, and like, I must like write another song, and like that reminds me of myself. Like, he's so self-centered.
it's like, I will disappear and leave a bunch of insulting gifts for my family.
Yeah.
They're like, would you care to explain it? No. And then he just disappears. It's
just like, I have so much sass, and everyone's like, Bilbo, you're a very rich person. Like, we're just trying to live, and you're like insulting us for
Bilbo,
being
you're such a
humble.
wealthy, ostentatious gay man. Stop flaunting it in our faces.
He truly is. He truly is just like a very like classic, like wealthy,
like
older,
an old queen, basically.
Established bachelor. Yeah.
It's
I love him.
It's so. But then like also he has his soft moments where he's like he longs to journey again, like when he's like leaving with the dwarves who came to his party, which I'm like, which dwarves came to his party? Were these just random dwarves, or were they members of the company? Which dwarves were they?
In the movie, I wish that was in the movie so much.
Oh my gosh. Or he's just like off on the road with dwarves again, and it's like, oh, he missed that. And then when you get into like bag and shield shipping, you're like, okay, well, I can see where this is going. But
I haven't even. I just see art for it. I appreciate it's aesthetically good. I haven't really. I'm gonna watch the movies at some point.
It is
I'm
okay.
scared.
Me and the people on Discord have been watching the movies
Yeah.
remotely together. I have screamed at various moments in frustration where there's so much potential in the movies.
I know.
Where then you're like, oh my god, you squandered it. How dare you?
Yeah.
Where it's just so many, like the first movie I think is a solid movie because it doesn't deviate as much from the source material.
Yeah.
And like you have like the dwarves arriving at Bag End. Each dwarf has his own personality. Where you're like, oh, that's Dwalin. Of course it is.
And it's like a very silly book, so I'm fine with it being silly. But I feel like Peter Jackson was like, it has to be another epic fantasy trilogy.
He includes a song. He includes the dwarf song.
The dwarf
they
song
sing.
is really good.
Well, also the song they sing while they're cleaning up after dinner.
Oh, really?
Like smash the glasses and crack the plates. That's what Bilbo Baggins plays. They have a whole song about it, and they're throwing plates everywhere, and you're like, oh, how delightful!
I do want to see that.
Yes, it is very charming, but yeah, be prepared when you watch it to be like, PJ, come on, man.
Yeah. Like, we were like on vacation, and I took a edible, which was legal because I live in California, and
I live in Illinois too,
flipping.
so
yeah.
No judgment here.
Yes, channel flipping, and just like saw, I think it was Thorin like having gold sickness and like being really emo, and it was just, we watched like 3 minutes of it, and it was when I was like very much in the depths of writing my fan fiction, like very consumed, and I was like, if I watch any more of this, I'm going to lose all of my love for the Lord of the Rings universe. It was just a lot. I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, do it. Like,
I think it'll wind down. I feel like it'll probably wind down my like level of obsession, and that might be a healthy thing. We'll see.
This will be your shot of reality, where it's just like, it's not as good, but
They made Sir Ian McKellen cry because he did not like acting on a green screen.
Yes,
That's
and
very
when
sad.
you make Sir Ian cry, you make me mad. because that's not something I want. They
Do you want to
may
know something very embarrassing?
tell me.
I did. I sent Sir Ian McKellen my fan fiction on
You
Twitter.
did.
Yeah.
You did do
'Cause
it.
I don't know why he follows me, and he shouldn't do that, but he does. And so I sent it to him.
And
He didn't reply.
Okay.
Maybe he'll do it at some
He's
point.
probably like, "What's this? What the hell?"
I bet he would like it. He posts Lord of the Rings memes sometimes.
He
posted a
does.
really
Right.
today.
But it's always like very like grandpa on Facebook memes
know.
where it's like, "Oh, you."
I know.
He's all of our gay grandfather.
I know. I just want to be friends with him. I was just like, I have to try. He might appreciate this.
I just want to have tea with you, Mr. McKellar. That's all.
Yeah, I
want.
was just like, this is the only chance I'll have.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
What would you say is your favorite part of the books? Let's say. I don't want to.
Like favorite scene in it?
Scene or just general like spot where you had to keep reading?
That's a good question.
Because scenes are always like you can have like the best scene ever, and then after another scene you're like, okay, well, I'm done for the night. But like, what was like a spot where you like, oh man, well I gotta do the next chapter?
I think because the books are split up, it's like by Two Towers and Return of the King, it's like Frodo and Sam are like their own halves of the book. So I think that the Two Towers section of Frodo and Sam was just like, they're in Ithilien, which is described really beautifully. Like there's a lot of stuff that isn't really in the movies. So it was like, I didn't remember it very well. And so that was really cool to read. There's like the beautiful scene where Sam like looks at Frodo and says, I love him. And then there's like the stare, and they don't fight in the book. They're like just together.
Well, it's like they do the obvious thing where it's like Frodo doesn't pick Gollum over like Sam. It's like that's not what happens. He never picks Gollum over Sam because that's not how he does it.
I like it. I think it's like good for the movie. I feel like in a book, like you can have a little bit more of like consistency between the characters, and like that we really just see them growing closer and closer and reaffirming again and again that like they're there for each other.
Yeah.
I feel like a movie needs to be a little bit more dynamic, especially really long movies like that. So I really understand why he introduced like it's like a love triangle in the movie. It's very interesting. I don't
weird love triangle.
I know. I'm like, it's weird. But like, yeah, I think that whole part, and then like the description of Sam fighting Shelob is so badass. Like he's just like, you can tell that Tolkien really, really loves Sam. Like the way that he describes him as just being this like loyal, powerful, like he gets this like blaze of anger in his eyes when someone like threatens Mr. Frodo. It's so good. So I think that was the one that I was like really reading it and like could not stop reading.
Yeah.
And then by the time I got to their parts in Return of the King, I was like, oh man, this is like, I'm getting close to the end, so I have to read very slowly now.
Yeah, you had to limit yourself to let it last.
Yeah. But it's so lovely. And it's like, I feel like just something about the description of Ithilien is so pretty too. It's such I think also like the movies are much more like, they end up in hard country and they're just like having a hard time for the whole movie.
Yeah.
And I think because it's a movie and you're not as inside the characters' heads as much, you can deal with that a little bit more. But in a book, you get so tired of hearing how horrible things are all the time that like those moments of relief, those moments of like, we're resting in Ithilien and there's herbs growing here and Sam has made a rabbit stew, and then it's like Faramir has rescued us and given us mead, like and it's in a soft bed. Like that's so like it's like you're so tense when you're reading about them being in hard situations, and then you just get to relax a little bit.
It's also very comforting to have like this place that it's like Ithilien where it's still beautiful, even though Mordor is like right behind those mountains.
Yeah.
Where it's like beauty is still very like determined to be here. Like even though this is like a no man's land basically between like the Rangers of Ithilien and the like massive armies of Mordor.
Yeah.
It's a very beautiful idea.
Yeah, and his like love of nature, Tolkien's love of nature and love of taking like joy and hope from the natural world. It's so like it's like corny, I guess, but I find it so beautiful. And
Again, an
really,
environmentalist message we could take to these times.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, no,
just keeping in
exactly.
mind, like, don't be like Saruman and like be like machines and engines must drive everything. It's like, no.
Yeah. Yeah, this idea that there just is this like really integral good in nature, and that like if you can learn to live in harmony with it, like that, those are the people that we like sort of respect the most.
Yeah. It's like
I also
respect
just love
respect nature
what.
or it will crush you. Like,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we need more tree bears in real life.
more, oh gosh.
I love how in that fight in Ithilien, an Oliphant escapes, and Sam like regularly for the rest of the book is like, "Where is that Oliphant? It just
I'm gonna
ran
find
off."
him.
Like they go back to Ithilien, and he's like, "Maybe I'll see it. Maybe it's here." Like he's so excited, and then Bilbo is like, "Sam, you saw an Oliphant. I'm so happy for you." It's very cute.
It is. And like one of the fun things like with like Lord of the Rings Online, they flesh out a lot of like cultures and characters. And like after the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, when like Aragorn's marching towards the Black Gate, you're going through Ithilien, and you meet like this member of like the Haradrim army, and he's like this sweet guy who's just like, "Can you find my Mumakil? Can you find my Oliphant? He ran off. He's probably very scared. Can you just make sure he's okay and like direct him like where to go? Like he should find his way to our homeland. That should be no problem. But just take care of him." And you're like,
That's adorable.
"Yeah, it is." And you're like, "Oh, they treat their like Oliphants the way like the Rohirrim treat their horses, which is like with reverence." And
Yeah.
it does a good job of like giving actual like personification to these evil men that we see in the books. It actually makes them like interesting characters. Like when you're making your way through Gondor when it's under attack by the Corsairs, you meet this Corsair named Ajax, who's just a bro. He's like, "I came here to party and like wreck stuff for fun," and then he's like, "Oh shoot, I'm the bad guy," and so you kind of adventure with him, and it's all very charming. And
Yeah. That's really cool. It's definitely like it's the most disappointing part of the books for me. Like obviously, I think is kind of like those types of racism, and of just like you're so interested in culture. Like why are these cultures so thinly sketched when like everything else is so developed? But
you have to
that's
walk through his own biases to look at these other cultures, and like
But I love that it's sort of like explored in other media.
yeah, it's definitely like you get to meet the men of Dunland, and you're like, "Oh well, they're not all one group. They're a bunch of different clans who fight each other, and like the Rohirrim took their land basically from them. Like they're justified in being pissed at the Rohirrim."
Well, it's so funny because they're in the movies they're bad, but then there's like the hill people in the books who help the Rohirrim.
Oh,
the maybe a different kind of people.
men of the Druidan Forest. They're different men.
Yeah. Okay. It seems like they like sort of pulled the description from the movie.
Yeah, they're like wild men, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, like again, they are kind of depicted kind of racistly in the books, where they're kind of like, ooh.
I'm not even sure what he's. Yeah. I feel like I don't even quite know like what he's going for with them, but I do love that Aragorn like is riding through their lands, and he just like stops and yells to the hills, and he's like, "You can have all of this."
Yeah.
Like, I give it to you, and they're like,
"Okay, cool." We're just gonna fade into the trees.
Yeah.
We're the Sasquatch of Middle Earth. We're just gonna
be
over here. But what would you say is your favorite? Yeah, I probably can already predict that you're gonna say hobbits, but like, what's your favorite kind of like? If you could be a part of any of these like culture groups in Middle Earth, like elf, dwarf, hobbit, man, which one would you feel like you would be most at home as?
I mean, I'd definitely be most at home with the hobbits. I feel like I'd also really vibe with the Rivendell elves, because they just seem, especially in The Hobbit, it just seems very fun. They're singing, they're dancing, they're teasing people. Yeah, like they're close enough that they can still like kind of visit the Shire. Like they have like heard of Frodo and like, or no, heard of Bilbo. So it's like I feel like that would be a very fun place to hang out.
Yeah. We
Because
like
I think, yeah.
we meet like Rivendell elves in the chapter before these ones when they scare off the Black Rider.
Oh yeah.
And they're just like kind of being teas and dicks to like Frodo, who's just like kind of been saved. But
Oh, is that like Gildor?
Yeah, Gildor. They're like, can we walk with you? And they're like, we have no need of your company, and hobbits are so dull.
Are so boring.
And you're like, what the fuck? Come on, man. But of course, it's like your friends who are like, oh, you're so boring, and it's like, oh, screw you. It's fun teasing, but I get what you're saying with like Rivendell elves, and I believe we talked about this last time with my guest, but like how the Rivendell elves, like, they are split into two sections. The elves, like Glorfindel and Elrond, who have been around since the first stage and have really seen some shit, so they're far more serious. And then you have like the elves who are like the trust fund kids who were born in like the third age after the Battle of the Last Alliance, and they're just like, yeah, we're just chilling here until we go into the West. It's not a big thing.
So yeah, they're like, everything's fine. We've never encountered evil.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. The Wood Elves, they seem pretty fun too.
They get drunk real easily.
It seems like a party, and I'm excited. I haven't gotten there yet.
Oh yeah.
To get to those guys, because it seems like a real party.
A real rip-roaring good time.
Yeah.
And they also seem to be like the most like open elves to like talking with people. Because like they have this tight-knit relationship with like the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain and the men of Lake Town. And all, like it's a trifecta of them just hanging out. And then you hear about them like defending themselves, like during the siege of Minas Tirith, like the Lonely Mountain gets besieged, and like they're all helping each other out, and like Bard's like descendant is killed.
Yeah, I remember that.
Dane Ironfoot, and that's the kind of stuff where I'm like, man, if I did like a Lord of the Rings like D&D session, I would set it all in the north while this stuff is happening, so we can get like the same sense of urgency, but also like independence. Yeah,
it's very cool. I like it a lot. I would love to play a Lord of the Rings role-playing game.
I've just been waiting for like people to be like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And I'm like, yes, please.
I did a couple sessions. I had my friend Brennan ran a like all halfling campaign, which was really fun, and so we basically all like started in the Shire, and it wasn't like specifically Lord of the Rings, but it was just very cute. Like there's
Lord of the
just
Rings adjacent.
Yeah. There's something good about starting with halflings, I think. I just feel like in my fantasy I always need like some very ordinary people who do not know what's going on. Like I think that really is what like makes Lord of the Rings good, is that like there's so much lore. Like obviously you're very versed in it. I'm like learning more about it, but it really
I
is
just don't go
accessible
on
even if
dates.
you don't know.
That's my thing. I just don't go on dates. That's why I just know so much.
I'm married, so I just like talk.
Well, now you can learn. You have Noelle. Now you can just dive right in.
I just tell them all about it. But yeah, it's like you don't need to like go into that lore to get it. You can like literally the books just start. These very epic fantasy books start with being like, I have to tell you about hobbits. They have fuzzy feet. I have to tell you about pipeweed. I'm going to have a whole chapter about pipeweed. And you're like, pipeweed is not going to come into the story later. It's so great.
Yeah, it's a very self-indulgent work for him.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, I'm going to put Tom Bombadil in there, and you're not going to do shit about it because I'm Tolkien. What are you going to do? Say no?
I love it.
And you're just like, okay, ballsy move, man. All right, I guess Bombadil's kind of interesting, but you also just kind of drop him. Like, and there are like a bunch of just fun little things that he just throws in there for no reason, like the fox that comes across like Pippin, Sam, and Frodo sleeping in the Shire and has an inner monologue, and you're like, why does this fox have an inner monologue? It's just
yeah, it's cool. It's a really like. I don't know. I feel like making stories like as a job kind of, I sometimes like have trouble reading or watching things without really dissecting them and being like, why does it work? What was the intention, et cetera, et cetera. And I just feel like he is so good at making it feel like this is a real thing that happened, that he's just like writing down the story of. Like, there's so many choices where I'm just like, I can't begin to fathom like how you made this complicated choice as a storyteller. Like, I really don't kind of like have awareness of Tolkien as the writer when I'm reading it, and that's really cool. Like, it just, he was so deep in his fantasy world. There's no reference to the outside world. There's no winks to like pull you in. Like, there's some in The Hobbit, but in Lord of the Rings, it's really like this full epic that he was just in, and that's like, I don't know, man. I'm envious of it. I want to be able to do that too.
Yeah, like you and every fantasy writer, basically.
Of course,
They're like,
yeah.
I want to be the next Tolkien, and it's like, you can't really be him because
No.
like the man invented a language and then went, oh god, everyone's gonna think this is super weird if I just say I made a language. Guess I have to write a bunch of fantasy novels to like back it up.
Like 20 languages.
Yeah, like it's like, oh, here's a derivation. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that word. Like, here's a different type of that same language. Like,
Well, and the fact, like, notes in the beginning that's like, so I've changed the Hobbit names. Here's what they actually are, and you're like, what are you talking
Yes.
about? You made all of this
Yes.
up. Like,
it's like, yeah.
what do you mean
like-
Sam's actual name is like Razamin or something?
Yeah,
like,
like-
I don't
like,
understand.
It's like at the end, he's like dunking on us. He's like, thank you for coming on this journey with me. Mary's real name is Calamak Brandagamba. And then it's just like, what the fuck, John?
It's so funny. It's just like, I think that's like, yeah, when I say I want to like be a creator like him, it's not that I want to do that level of world building, because I'm not as interested in that, but just that level of committing to the world that you are in and being like, I'm not telling this because it is a classic story. I'm not referencing story tropes or anything. I'm so in my own story that I'm telling you what happens, like, and that's like what you come out of it.
Like, very much like a charging in, like, this is what the story is going to be. This is the world it's in.
Yeah.
It's very much like this is my vision, and that we are going to explore it. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just-
and it just the fact that he's writing it as this history, as this like translated history, and he never really, he never blinks. Like, you never get the little moment of like, oh, maybe this isn't. The only other book I've ever read like that is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, which is this really gorgeous long fantasy book, and it's like literally the only other one I can think of where it's just like, you're just like, did you come from another dimension? Like, is this like a scholarly work from another alternate timeline of the world? I just don't understand how you are so in the story.
I do love it how he's like, this is all based off writings from the Red Book of Westmarch, which was kept by the descendants of Samwise's daughter Eleanor, the Fairbanks of Westmarch, and he's like, and this itself is only like a copy of a copy that I found.
I know.
And he's also like, a bunch of the stuff Bilbo put in the Red Book is not recalled because it's not very important. And meanwhile, like, Bilbo's in the Undying Lands, like, fuck you. My treatises on, like, Elvish were very important.
I love it.
I'm Bilbo Baggins. I am not being pushed aside. No one puts Bilbo in a corner.
Oh my god. Tolkien like dies and goes to heaven, and Bilbo is somehow there.
Bilbo's here to kick his ass.
John.
Prince Caldor says, if you were to add something to Lord of the Rings, what would it be?
More women. Yeah.
I mean, fair. That is a
Plenty.
very fair
Plenty
thing.
more women.
What? Three isn't enough for you?
And we have, what's her name? The lady in Gondor who talks too much.
Yoreth.
Um,
Yoreth.
yeah.
Oh, God.
I feel like I mean, it's like, because I think he writes the women well, is the thing. Like, Yoreth is really funny, like, Rosie Cotton is really cute, Eowyn's really tragic. It's like, a lot more of your characters could have been women. But I can also, like, just do that myself. I don't know.
Fan
yeah.
fiction. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. Yeah, or even, like, original fiction.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, and I would say, like, romance, but I literally just think it's there, so, yeah.
Racklaw says, what do you think about Farmer Maggot's strange name? It sounds derogatory for no reason.
I think it's nice.
I
He's
think
Farmer Maggot.
Farmer Maggot. I mean, I might have
I
to
like
do
that
something
his
with
wife
like,
calls him Maggot.
well, yeah, his wife's just like, you listen here, Maggot. It's like, what are you, a drill sergeant? What are you gonna?
Farmer Maggot is a cool dude. He, as we learn later, he hangs out with Tom Bombadil sometimes. Like I feel like if he has a name that sounds silly, it's because he like owns it in some way.
Like
so.
a good neighbor, Farmer Maggot is there. He'll tell
Yes.
he'll tell strangers that you're dead. And
Yes.
I like how that's his solution. Like, don't worry, Mr. Frodo. I'll see to it. I'll tell him you're
I'll
dead.
tell them that I killed
It's like,
him.
cool. Thanks,
I
Farmer
caught
Maggot.
with my mushrooms. I killed him. Like, sorry, that's it.
My dogs ate him. It's fine.
Yeah, there's no remains.
Yeah.
And then Nazgul are like, oh my god, we have to like make these dogs poop. It's stupid.
Also, I just gotta talk about his dogs. How big they must be, because
They must
hobbits
be
are so.
very-
I'm always insulted from that one scene in the movies, where like the rider rides up to this guy chopping wood, and he has this like German Shepherd with him, or like.
Yeah.
But you're like, that's a really small like dog to be barking at him,
true.
because there's no way they really could have made it bigger without having like.
Yeah, I guess they didn't do a lot of that kind of CGI.
Mhm.
Yeah, they should have. They should have just had one of those giant like Irish wolfhounds. which
Yes.
look
Or like a
cartoonishly
Great
large
Dane of
anyway.
some kind. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's just
Yeah.
very weird, because I'm like, they've done such a good job with making the hobbits look small, and then you're just like, here's just a very small German Shepherd, and I'm just like, okay then.
I've been listening to Newcomers, which is a podcast where Nicole Byer and Lauren Lapkus watch things that they haven't seen. So they're watching Lord of the Rings. And I never noticed it before, but Nicole Byer, every movie is like, I think the hobbits are getting smaller, which I think she's right. Like, I think they get smaller over the course. Like, they sort of, because like the hobbits are mostly off on their own in Two Towers and Return of the King, and then they like come back with all the big people, and like they're just a lot smaller than they were.
Yeah. Man, I haven't really paid attention to like their heights changing before, but that's like an interesting.
I think their heights are very variable because they had
Yeah.
to use a lot of different techniques, and that's
So long
fine.
as they indicate that they are short, that's
Yes.
basically all they need.
I just like when they get picked up. I think it's very cute, and it happens
It is.
so much.
Just the idea of like Boromir just picking up Merry and Pippin and just walking with them through the snow, while Aragorn has Sam and Frodo, and it's just.
The fact that Frodo faints into Faramir's arms is like, I can't stand it. Like, it's so cute. It's just, he's like, Faramir spends the whole evening like questioning him and trying to figure out what he's doing, and Frodo's finally like, we have to take the ring to Mordor, and then he just passes out. Faramir kills him. He's a damsel. He is a classic
Oh
damsel.
my gosh, he really is.
Yeah.
He's a more like forceful damsel, where he actually has purpose,
Yeah.
but he is very
Yeah.
much the.
He's just, he has purpose and he has will, but he does not.
Oh,
He's
Sam,
not very effective
hold
in
me
any way.
Your rough, calloused hands. Oh.
Yeah, he is only effective in that he keeps going. Like
Yeah.
I love it. I love
And it
it.
very much matches with him being like the upper class gentleman hobbit.
It's truly, I mean, it's such a wonderful romance.
So
trope.
much to like, almost like a, you could almost like make like a Pride and Prejudice type, like.
I know.
Oh, have you heard? Frodo Baggins has been seen his gardener after dark. Ooh.
Absolutely.
They all hide behind their
Absolutely.
fans.
This is what I'm saying.
Molly's like,
is what
this
I'm
is
saying,
what it's
it's
always
excellent.
been.
It's what it's all. It's literally in the story. I just don't. Some people. Yes. Yes,
Like,
it was very fun to. It was fun to write the fan fiction and like write those parts of just like all the hobbits being like, oh, like it's like they're not really homophobic. They're just like, oh, the gardener.
It's like, oh. How uncool. And
Yeah.
It's very like interesting seeing like the different hobbit dynamics, because like Frodo is like the scholarly rich and like inheritor of a fortune, and then you have like the frat boys Merry and Pippin, who it's like
Who are they're
their
like
dads are old money.
yeah, they're trust fund kids. They have never had to answer to anyone.
And it brings into like the idea of like old money being good but new money being bad when we look at Lotho's Sackville Baggins. Where it's kind of implied like the Sackville Bagginses didn't start out very wealthy, and Lotho's started like doing a lot of business deals and then slowly bringing in some of Saruman's influence in,
Oh yeah.
just to maybe outshine the like actual Bagginses of Bag End.
Yeah.
Any kind.
Yeah. Yeah. Hobbit class is very
It's very interesting. Yeah.
I really like. There's some. I love Sam being the servant and like sort of like not quite fitting with Frodo and Merry and Pippin, and then just having that like evolve over the course of the story is really lovely. And Frodo's trying. Like I think that Frodo is not comfortable having a servant, and so Frodo's always like gassing up Sam and trying to be like, no, Sam's great. Like Sam was my buddy. You are not just my servant.
It's so brave. It's like, Sam,
so
I couldn't do any of this without you.
I know. The part where Sam recites poetry and then they're all like, wow, Sam, where did you learn that? And Frodo's like, he wrote it. He wrote it. He writes poetry.
Gosh, do you know nothing about him?
Yeah.
And it's just so, and then like, what's really good for fan fiction is that you can just look at like the massive like Hobbit family trees of like hobbits we never ever meet, and just be like, oh, I could write a fan fiction about these like hobbits. Like one of the most interesting ideas I've thought of is like Merry and Pippin don't really tell their families where they're going. They just vanish into the old forest, and they're like the heirs of their family.
Oh my god.
And it's like, they're gone for a whole year. They were lost in the old forest. At which point, like Bilbo was gone for about a year on his adventure, and people were like, he's dead. Start selling his stuff.
Well,
like,
everyone thinks they're dead when they get back, don't they?
Lost.
Yeah.
Like they're like lost in the old forest by all accounts, basically.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then you learn that like one of my favorite like headcanons is that we know that Pippin has 3 older sisters. And like the idea of like one of like their little brother has vanished, their parents are distraught, there's like a rift between them and the Brandybucks because the Tooks are like, why didn't you look after them? They were in Buckland, you should have been looking after them. And they just don't talk to the Brandybucks for a while, and then like all this terrible stuff starts happening in the Shire. Like they start doing guerrilla warfare in Tookland, and then one day Pippin just shows up in a suit of armor with like saying, I'm a herald of the king now, and it takes everything in his like sister's power to not like grab a butcher's knife and be like, I'm gonna pry him out of that tin can. Like I am going to kill him for putting our family through all this hardship.
You caused so much drama.
You're like, we thought you were dead. How dare you?
I love thinking about his 3 big sisters also being like the Took badasses, like hunting humans and hiding in the hills.
Like having
the
war
scouring
paint.
of the Shire is so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. But I feel like those hobbits off in East Farthing, they just go on adventures sometimes. Like it seems like people are a little bit used to that happening.
I mean, Brandybucks can swim. What fucking weirdos, am I right?
He just swam away. We don't know. How long does it take to swim? We don't know. He could still be swimming. Like.
Yeah. Like they have boats. How weird.
I love it. Oh
gosh. Yeah. Does anyone else have anything they want to ask us? Otherwise, I could keep riffing about Lord of the Rings all day, but
I probably should go do a scotch of work because I haven't been very productive. It's been Hobbit brain rot forever.
I mean, there are worse brain rots to have, really.
There really are. It's brought me a lot of joy, so I can't.
And you brought a lot of like starting Tolkien-tober, I think, was like something that has brought a lot of people happiness for them to start going, you know what, I'm gonna start looking into this stuff. And like
I'm really glad.
I've been enjoying like all the art people have been making, and like
so much good stuff.
I found so many people to follow now. It's beautiful.
It's really nice. I don't know, like I don't know. Like internet spaces for me have always been very career oriented, and it's really like obviously I'm not like pretending I'm not myself on this, but like it's really nice to just be like this is a place for stupid thoughts and like
Yeah, it's
talking
like,
about one thing.
I can
And,
take things less seriously. I can just be here to have fun. It like
Yeah.
this isn't work. That's the big thing.
Yeah, which I think is like when you come up on social media in a job way, it like becomes like work, but it's like it's just been like very much like the happiest part. I feel like the thing I miss the most about like being in quarantine right now is just like getting to meet people at parties and like chit chat about things and like I'm just like
and unload
I'm
about Lord of the
nice
Rings.
time. It always would be Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I mean that's like I'm going to like good parties, so like everyone had better listen.
Hobbit
But yeah, it's just been nice having a lot of like meeting new people and talking about this thing that we love so much.
That's kind of the thing I've been really looking forward to with this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm like, God, like I like see a bunch of like hot takes on Twitter from like someone I've never heard of before. I'm like, I wonder what they have to say. And then I'm like, hey, do you want to come chat on a Twitch stream? And they're like,
love that.
and I'm always surprised at like how enthusiastic they are.
Yeah.
Like I was
It's
surprised
such a
that
big-
you responded to me because I'm like, hey, this person's like mildly famous. I wonder if she'll come on. And then you're like,
I've been going
hell
months
yeah!
on-
And I'm like,
I literally haven't done work in a long time. It's fine.
it's the quarantine blues.
It's the quarantine. It's whatever brings serotonin is like, go for it.
Shoot it.
But yeah, I mean, it's just like it's such a big world, and so I feel like everyone has just their own little place in it, and I genuinely never get tired of just like thinking about like little headcanons and like learning new little facts. And so it's like I just feel like everyone. It feels like I was never really into Star Wars, but Star Wars feels that way too, where it's just this like really big established world that people can have their little specialties in, and that's so fun because I love hearing from people, and like I love that there's like a weird Silmarillion stan culture that I don't understand, and like people posting memes, and I'm like, you're posting memes for like a fictional Bible that is like I don't get it, but I love it.
Yeah,
happy.
And then once you like take in the Silmarillion bit by bit, like you start to go, oh, like you yourself start to explore different things, which like first off, I'm gonna shout out to Psychic Seagull in chat. I forget their tag on Twitter, but they've been doing a lot of like the Merrywin fan art, and I'm
Very
like,
good.
I didn't even think of this before.
Genius.
And now I'm like, now I gotta write a fan fiction about it. And Spectraling, yes.
That's awesome.
I will say, people in chat who have not followed Spectraling on Twitter yet, do so. They post some really beautiful art. It's all very soft and it's all very sweet. Anyway.
It's very beautiful.
So,
a little bit sexy. It's very good.
I believe that should be all. So, thank you everyone for tuning in to this week's episode of Tolkien Tuesday. Molly, hopefully we can have you back later on for a later episode where we can talk about. I will definitely tune into you doing it
because it's fun to be in the chat while it's happening. Because I feel like I just every time I was reading it, I was like, I want to stop and tweet every single line, but I have to like I can't like overwhelm people. But it's nice to just like it's just so fun to dive into the text. So I'm down. I'd love to come back and chat.
Sweet. But yeah, next week we will be doing chapters 6 and 7, The Old Forest, and In the House of Tom Bombadil. I forget who our guest is going to be. I really need to reconfirm that they can make it. But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in, and see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
All right, we're off the air.
Cool. Thank you. That was lovely.
Oh, it was lovely having you, Molly. Again, I am just perfectly happy to just have just complete nerds, because I'm going to be real. I haven't been able to talk with a lot of my friends recently, and so, like, just to be able to cast aside all social, like, inhibitions.
We're still on air?
Are we? Oh, my goodness.